Good afternoon and welcome back to the SMITE Pro League. It's been a while and I'm excited to say that. My name's Tom Badiger and I'm joined here by the illustrious Anatoly Alexeyenok. Glad to have you back. It's been 2 weeks without the Pro League. How you doing, man?
It's been a long time and I'm just excited to get into this very first North American set of Spacestation Gaming up against Dignitas.
It's going to be sick. Like I said, we've been on a little bit of a hiatus. We got a chance to see the console teams and the minor league teams beforehand, but this is the big show, folks. Team Rival up on top. Of course, Renegades in the middle, but on the top of everybody's mind as they did take home the mid-season trophy. As Tolly said, we're going to be watching the black and yellow on both sides today. Spacestation Gaming, they are 2-7. They have not had a strong season thus far. But the fun thing about this one, Phase 1 feeds into Phase 2, and they've got a chance for redemption today versus Team Dignitas. It might be a tall order.
It has to be a great start from them because in the first phase, they started off with a very slow start, losing their doubleheader in that first week. Now with another doubleheader against two very strong teams, not only Dignitas today, but Splice tomorrow. This is the time for them to come back up against Dignitas.
Dignitas is the one that's going to be standing in front of Spacestation at first. And when we look at this team, there's a whole lot to celebrate, especially since we're in the regular season. These guys tend to choke on land, and, well, we're on land. They choke at the bigger points. This is regular season. You see QvoFred yawning a little bit. You might need to wake up just a little bit for this game, but I think this team is ready to go and on fire.
I think sometimes it's unfair to say how much they choke on land, considering that their very last land loss was against Renegades, the team that won it all anyway. Yeah. The trendsetters, I would say. Dignitas are very good mechanical players. If you give them a little bit of an inch, they're going to take a mile, obviously, so you can't give them anything to work with.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think that's very telling of the team coming into this. Is obviously we've seen some changes. Hurriwind in this mid lane, so it's not the same, and Zero's no longer here. It's not the same Dignitas that we've seen over years and years and years, but at the same time, you have seen that improvement. Renegades were on something else, man. Something else happened that Midsummer Invitational, and Dignitas were poised to be the winners. So they ran into a freight train. I won't fault them for that. Coming into the regular season, I expect to see a lot of that same fervor for sure.
They're definitely a consistent team in the regular season. They just need to find a way to mold and shape the meta to their will that other teams can't adapt to, because Renegades definitely found out about it during the regular season, during LAN, United even finding out about it during the regular season, but Spacestation Gaming always seem to struggle against teams that are the trendsetters and also against higher mechanical players, so it's up to them to kind of break down this brick wall.
I agree there. When we look at Spacestation, these guys have rarely been the leaders. These guys generally do the following, both in the standings, unfortunately, and as far as their understanding of the meta is concerned. We usually see them playing vanilla stuff that's pretty standard, and as you mentioned, a lack of mechanical prowess. Well, I think here comes Cyno short. He was added to the team just a couple of weeks towards the end of phase number 1, and so the team didn't see the success that they might have asked for or wanted right away. But with a couple of with a couple of days and weeks in the oven, able to kind of work this out. I'm excited because Cyno is that mechanical player that we were saying is kind of missing, and he also has a tendency to kind of breathe new life. He's got an interesting play style, and it might just be enough for Spacestation to lean on that to launch themselves forward.
Cyno's transition from Season 5 World's MVP to Season 6 was not pretty whatsoever. Starting off with Splice in week number 4, he goes 3-6 in his first 2 sets, and then since he joined Spacestation Gaming around that week 9, week 10 marker, he goes 2-9. Now, to be fair, to Cyno's credit, the teams that he's lost to in the first phase was Rival, Dignitas, Splice, Renegades, and then the last set up against SK Gaming. So you kind of can't fault Cyno entirely, but he hasn't had that same success in Season 5.
Absolutely. It's a team game, but at the same time, when you're a star, it is absolutely your job to be the star. I'm not asking Cyno to come out here and turn this into a 100% win percentage team, but he absolutely has to elevate more so than he has done.
And to Cyno's credit as well, his matchup against QvoFred, historically, he's won 6 of the 9 games that they've played against each other. His only losses was in Season 6 when they were together in Splice.
If you're going to have that sort of history, we have 2/3 of the wins here. I mean, how do you transition that? We talk a lot about lane matchups. Jungle matchups are a little bit different because you're not staring at the opponent, and it's more cerebral than it is mechanical. How do you expect, or how do you want, rather, if you're Coach Tolley here, here. How do you want Cyno to kind of leverage his play against Qvo's?
I think it's more about how you're going to stop QvoFred. Not necessarily what exactly Cyno does, but how, let's say, JeffHindla is going to try to stop QvoFred to give Cyno that advantage.
So is that how Cyno has kind of reached that point? That's a great stat. Two-thirds of the time he's winning against Qvo. Is that reflective of the team, his own mentality? Because if you have a smaller sample size, you can't draw anything from that. But 9 games, that's a lot.
It is a lot. And I think that was the Season 5 Splice days where Splice was just on a different kind of spectrum, seeing how they were performing in Season 5. I think it was a team effort, not necessarily Cyno specifically. But here with Spacestation Gaming, it needs to be more of the team effort. We haven't really seen that out of them in the first phase.
So I'm looking here from everything you just said for Cyno to kind of reach into that into yesterday's notes and go, all right, this is how we found those wins as Splice. This is what we did to keep QvoFred at bay, and hopefully Spacestation can kind of employ those same tactics. Picks and bans on the way for game number 1 as we get ready, as I said, for the black and yellow to clash together. Spacestation Gaming, this team has, I think, had their most struggles right here in this phase. They have their moments where BaRRaCCuDDa can just will the game into a victory. JeffHindla has his times where he can absolutely help things out. The same goes for the other 3 players on the field. Spacestation, though, seem to always put themselves a step behind in picks and bans. Some notable changes here post mid-season. What do you expect from the squad?
I'm expecting aggression, the early game aggression, trying to get that advantage to shut down Dignitas, because I don't think that Spacestation can beat Dignitas in a late game scenario when everything's even 35 minutes or later into the game. It's up to Spacestation to find the early invades, maybe red buff invades, try to shut down Hurriwind or maybe even Ataraxia.
This is an interesting ban phase here from Spacestation. So one of the big changes, if you haven't been playing at home or watching any of the other leagues, we have more bans. Each team starts off with 3 bans now. Secondary ban phase will be the same, and the picks go the same way as well. But with that in mind, Spacestation Gaming are banning some of the powerful characters. Arlong Shen, Isis, some changes there. She's very, very hot. The other side, though, Dignitas is really sticking to this outside conversation that people have been having about Spacestation. A lot of people at home feel that JeffHindla is a big problem on this team. You see some Guardian bans here from Dignitas. I mean, they're trying to identify that as well.
I don't think that that's the issue for Spacestation is the support. If you're banning a Fafnir and a Geb, those are not characters that's going to carry a game in outright. These are team utility gods that enable the rest of his team to do things with. And honestly, I think Athena is still going to be a very strong pick for Jeff.
I got you know, for what it's worth, I am on your side. I said this on Esports Weekly yesterday. I'm not on that Jeff train. I don't think that's necessarily the case. But Dignitas here banning away 2 of his kind of go-to options.
Sure.
Kumbhakarna being thought of right here for the Guardian of choice, and he will be locked in. Kumbha has great control, quite obviously. Across the way, Zhong and Thor will deal with a Muzen cop, Kumbha, and the Morrigan.
I like it, actually. Morrigan with AMC. If you're looking for pushing power between mid and the long lane, doesn't matter where that AMC or Morrigan go, those are the 2 guys you kind of want to get that pushing power and start collapsing on the duo side of the jungle. Get some red buffs, get some neutral camps in form of the mid camps or maybe oracles. Get that early game lead that Spacestation desperately need.
Well, there's going to be some of this power, this push power as well. Anhur has been a go-to pick for a while now. We saw Dardes really flex on it in the mid-season invitational. When I say flex, he played in the mid lane. That's a slight flex. I mean, he really came out and flexed the guns on everybody. He looked fantastic. Anhur mid for push pressure isn't brain science. This isn't anybody's secret trick. We know that this has been able to be done for years and years, but Dardes brought it back into the spotlight, and Dignitas are going to do the same thing.
It could be for Hurriwind in mid. You could also have Zhong going the solo lane as a result, or they could keep it more traditional and have Hurriwind play the Zhong mid and then Ataraxia on the Anhur, because the very first set that Ataraxia had to play against an Anhur was SK Zapman, and he got abused from it. So he might have been practicing it here, and we're going to see how he demonstrates with it.
At the same time, Zhong, I want that in the hands of variety, baby.
Sure.
That's who I want to be piloting this Zhong. A couple of those replays that we were watching during the Dignitas segment was just Zhong at a variety, man.
Yeah.
Do that. Feed the hot hand. That's where I'd like to see the big painter, man. Second round bans here. We say no to Terra and Arachne. and Dignitas on the clock trying to figure out their last ban. As you mentioned, we kind of have our laners and our guardians, so we're looking for potentially a jungler and a solo unless things get real weird for Space Station.
Yeah, Space Station have a lot of pushing power, good amount of control from Kumbhakarna, need to find something to burn more bees potentially along the way. QvoFred has been a big fan of Hunbats in general, but with Thor receiving some of these changes, I think we're going to see a good demonstration out of the Thor. Although even way back when in Season 2, I remember Trixtank was playing the Thor in that support role, so I wouldn't put it past Dignitas to maybe try to go for that, but probably going to be more standard.
No Najah ban. And obviously is one of Cyno's kind of go-to selection. They've banned out the Arachne and the Pele. Najah, however you feel about him on your tier list, Cyno certainly holds that character in high regard. So Dignitas trying to figure this one out. With that said, Thor and Anhur, both CC immune ults, can give Najah some problems. Also, the Daji is a character that we've seen a lot of players in the jungle go to some big burst damage with control.
It's interesting that you point out one of his picks, because there's also the Awilish in that pool, and when you're playing the Anhur, you should be worried about that Awilish pull, honestly. So I think that Space Station Gaming, with that in mind, should be thinking about the Awilish for Cyno.
Horus banned by Space Station as they round out the final ban here in our game number 1 of a potential 5. Zhong, Thor, and Anhur leave a Guardian to be selected. And again, some ambiguity there with Zhong, Anhur as far as short, long, mid. There's a lot of choices for Dignitas to go to right now.
With just their first 3 picks from Dignitas, they have a lot of burst damage from the Thor Anhur, and then a lot of damage over time and slows between the Zhong and the setup from the Thor and the Anhur.
Little bit of a mistake there on the broadcast, but Khepri is going to be on the side of Dignitas. And so with that in mind, for Space Station, I'm looking at the Thanatos, I'm looking at the Achilles. We've seen Cyno play both of those gods as well. I go right to the executes when I see a Khepri. Talk to me. Is my thought process outdated? Should I be holding those executes in high regard?
I think it's still definitely worth considering if it makes sense to throw in Achilles, Alquonk, Thanatos potentially in that jungle role just to counter the Scarab's Blessing. Yeah, it's worth it. Use that global pressure from Thanatos, or use the heavy burst damage from the Achilles, or try to go for more of a late game style with the Alquonk because you have the pushing power of the Muzen and Morrigan, so you know that Cyno's going to be farming pretty casually.
Well, the set will come out. And we've had a lot of conversation about Set. Set has been powerful, most notably in lane. His 1v1 capability is off the charts. When you look at his jungle capability, he doesn't really do much early game. Once you get those items, everybody seems to die. So Set will be paired up with an Osiris. I think it's likely to see Osiris in the solo lane, Set in the jungle, but of course that can be tossed on its head as well. Dignitas with the King Arthur, though, has taken away some of that ambiguity. Arthur really only plays that solo lane, which means Zhong won't be in the hands of Variety. So we're going to see Zhong either in mid or long lane.
Yes, and QvoFred on the Thor, not going to be Trixtank because he's going to be playing that Khepri. A lot of these European supports have been favoring the Khepri. I'm looking at Trixtank, I'm looking at also Raffer out of Renegades, kind of setting this meta at the end of the first phase. So after Dignitas' loss to Renegades, taking a page out of their book.
It should be a lot of fun watching these teams go head-to-head because I think both of them are coming out with steam from the Midseason Invitational. Dignitas obviously played and just barely missed taking it away because of the prowess that Renegade surprised everybody with. And Space Station, on the other hand, Jeff and BaRRa don't like missing lands, man, and there is that human element. They've got something to prove here, which, for what it's worth, I leaned a lot on the something to prove narrative with Renegades. They did it. I'm not saying that Space Station are going to come out and look like Funball and Raffer did at Midseason Invitational, but I think there is a non-zero. You got to pay attention to that.
Anything can happen, honestly. Once something clicks, then the team can just easily make a 180 after this.
Yeah? So how do you expect Space Station to make that 180? You know, you're going up, you hit the ramp. What is going to turn things around here?
They have to do the old Season 5 Splice effect where they create their own meta that teams just weren't ready for, where Splice developed a 3-man meta in the duo lane with Divios making that early rotation. No one can really adapt to it as a result. The way Renegades were playing with a lot of aggressive hunters in mid lane for Dardas in the first phase of Season 6, nobody could prepare for that. A lot of defensive utility style gods coming out of Raffer, so I think Space Station needed to make that mix.
We'll see if Space Station has something new, or if Dignitas are going to do the same old game 1, on the way.
Well, it's absolutely time to move into it. Thank you there on the desk, Tom and Anatoly. It is Finch and Taco bringing you the action as we move into a game to start Phase 2. Space Station struggled a lot in Phase 1, but they do have Cyno here now. They didn't get a lot of time with him up against Dig, who looked so hard to beat in Phase 1, Taco. You think Space Station have a chance to try and turn this around?
You have to keep in mind, for as strong as Dignitas might have looked in Phase 1, when it came down to it, MSI, they floundered a decent bit, and
Sure.
it's kind of weighing heavy on the back of Dignitas' mind. I think that both of these teams have something to prove here.
Absolutely they do. I mean, Dignitas wants to do exactly what you said and prove that they were the team we thought they were in Phase 1. And Space Station want to show that having andinster in the mid lane, bringing Cyno onto this team, is going to be enough for them to look different here in this second phase. Things shifted around a bit. Renegades are kind of the top dog now, so everyone has shifted where they think they are and where they want to be. And this is your first chance to show it, as things are already looking a bit different. If you hadn't been watching at MSI and we're tail into Phase 1, we got mages over here in the long lane, Taco.
Yeah, the shifts are not just taking place amongst the teams in terms of standings, but also
Sure.
just in terms of what kind of god pools these players are having to flex into. It seems like more often than not, hunters are being required now to have some mages locked away in their back pocket. And as for the mid laners, they've pretty much established the solely hunter dominance here. And I think that it's just the prioritization of wanting that pressure for invades.
This is such a big season all around because everyone's having to play so different from normal. Hunters now are having to show some ability to flex into other classes. Mid lane has to deal with even more action there than normal, as supports spend a lot of time there. Supports don't get to just sit in duo lane anymore. That's why I say long lane so often. It hardly feels like it. Everyone has to play so differently nowadays. I think that's part of why Renegades are able to come through. They adapted quickly to this new style.
One big concern that I do have, though, kind of breaking things down a little bit more in depth in terms of these compositions right here in front of us, this Khepri pick from Trixtank could just be a death of BaRRaCCuDDa early on. Ataraxia needs some pressure, but BaRRaCCuDDa's just looking for the first blood.
He very nearly had that solo potential, but Trixtank couldn't have gotten there in any better timing, and he might still. The damage brings Ataraxia down quite low, but Trixtank does just enough to keep Nate alive. They got to be careful. Cyno here as well on the set, showing some presence in the long lane.
Cyno a little bit more interested in soaking some farm. Ataraxia isn't careful, though. Can't step up too far, but without that purple buff being available for an invade, it's just going to be a wave leech from Cyno. Can't really do anything further here, and Ataraxia sustained enough thanks to Trixtank alleviating some of that pressure that BaRRa was applying.
But you were talking about some of the value that you were seeing coming from this Khepri, you know, as the game was going on, Taco. What's Trixtank going to have to do for this Dig roster?
Well, it's just the fact that he has that Scarab's Blessing, because what's the one thing that Set loves to do? He loves to isolate a member and then look for a free pick. And what's the best thing that Khepri's pretty much prioritized for every single time? It's so that they can prevent that pick from ever taking place. So the target focus from Space Station has to be clean the whole way through. And in all honesty, Finch, it might even require Space Station to go a little bit even further outside the box, because they're going to have to kind of psych Dignitas out, make them waste that Scarab's Blessing if they want to be truly effective with this set.
Yeah, they might even make Trixtank the target, or maybe it's yet again Ataraxia. Cyno has shown up, but a two-man stun buys a moment. But without any movement abilities, Ataraxia is out of options. It's Space Station Gaming who hit first. They take first blood.
A little bit of a smile there on BaRRaCCuDDa's player cam, but it's just the beginning here. A strong start, though, for Space Station, because this is going to allow them to invade the purple buff, looking to strip away even more farm. Cyno, though, coming under duress from Trixtank and Quvo.
This is not good. Quvo uses the wall to make it so Cyno can't escape. An immediate response from Dignitas. They'd like more. Trixtank is quite low. BaRRaCCuDDa drops his own ultimate to force them back out, but it's up to Hurriwind to try and keep them away from Trix. He can't do enough, and BaRRaCCuDDa finds one more kill. He's 2-0.
Hurriwind just looking to disengage, but will lose his purification beads in the process. Jet falling kind of low. A nice impale from Hurriwind, but not good enough to secure the purple buff. Space Station will wind up with the steal, and 2 kills now to Dignitas' 1.
And a lot of action here in the long lane. I mean, we just don't see it that often anymore, right? All these people on the left side of the map with multiple gank attempts for different roles, not even all junglers. But with these mages over here, man, it looks like this is where they want to fight.
And to be fair, if Cyno's looking for somewhere to get a running start, dual lane is definitely the place to be. Ataraxia is not going to be insanely mobile on that Zhong Kui. You've got a little bit of a tankier boy option with the Zhonger, but it's still typically not going to be enough to allow you to fully prevent all the damage that BaRRa and Cyno can combine for.
Especially not when you consider how many options the Morrigan has to pair alongside Cyno. I mean, BaRRaCCuDDa can get all the Morrigan damage off as a mage, and then even transition into a Khepri or a Kumbhakarna to lock him down inside the set damage. There's so many options available in this laning phase. Ataraxia is very likely to need a little bit more help. Is there a point where this Zhong comes online, like maybe an item or level he needs to get to where he can feel a little bit better in this matchup?
As for right now, since BaRRaCCuDDa was able to draw first blood and pick up a secondary kill after that, BaRRa's probably going to be able to maintain at least a half-level lead over Ataraxia. That pressure relief is just going to have to come out of solid rotations from Dignitas, but that's exactly why BaRRa is trying to ward those choke points as deeply as possible up near that Gold Fury pit to give him ample time to know in case Dignitas is looking for that rotation.
That's about the best we can expect from BaRRaCCuDDa here so far, but already fireworks early on in this matchup. And to be fair, you know, despite Spacestation having a slightly different look, I didn't know how close this match was coming into it. I think Dignitas were still the heavy favorites, just based on the way they looked. We're still early days, of course, but I like the way Spacestation are playing against Dignitas this early on.
Hey, it's signs of life for sure when you compare it to Phase 1. JeffHindla, though, could be in some trouble. Epic uppercut straight into the air, but back down comes Ataraxia to no follow-up whatsoever. Spacestation may be kind of feigning that they wanted to go on the aggressive there.
Yeah, I think that JeffHindla might have bit off a bit more than he was expecting to on that one and had to drop the ult to get him out of there. It does work. It's just the ult from Kumbhakarna that ends up being used there. Everyone else holds on to their relics, it would seem, for the most part, as Spacestation fall back yet again. There is, though, a lot of control, I feel like, Taco, available as Hold On, Aqua in some trouble on the right-hand side, makes it back to the tier 2, but Variety is going to look for the invade.
But this could be the pressure relief that Dignitas needed over there in duo lane. Variety taking hold of Solo is going to force JeffHindla to try and prevent him from stealing away Aquarius' blue buff, but Variety's still trying to give pursuit. King Arthur just never wants to let you go.
And Variety is one that really likes his King Arthur pick in the short lane here on the right-hand side. He plays it often and plays it very, very well. And even though he's been through a bunch of different changes in narration here, King Arthur constantly getting whittled away at until it felt like he was in the right spot, I think Variety still feels like this is a god he can make a lot of big plays with.
Well, he's certainly giving Aquarius some trouble, and something that I am a little bit surprised to have seen, or a lack thereof, is QvoFred's presence on the map with this Thor so far.
He's been quiet, hasn't he? As Trixtank forces Cyno to teleport to the Sand Clone, and that gets him out of there.
Hurriwind backing up Trixtank as well, but Cyno just not going to give either side an opportunity to look for further punish, although this could be dangerous here for Spacestation. All of Dignitas grouping around their red buff, trying to be front-facing.
Yeah, they absolutely want to come in and make this steal happen, so JeffHindla gonna move in to try and secure the buff. They do so, but BaRRaCCuDDa now left alone left-hand side. He switched into the Zhong to get the ult off, but it does not work. Ataraxia is the one that gets the kill credit, and just like that, by out-rotating Spacestation, Dignitas have reestablished pressure on the left-hand side.
Unfortunately for BaRRa, he picked left, and everybody else from Spacestation broke right. Made it all too easy for Trixtank to look for that bug hug of death, and, well, BaRRa's gonna... I think the worst part about that for BaRRa dying is that it gives Ataraxia an opportunity to catch up and actually surpass him now as Ataraxia ticks in at level 9. And BaRRa's gonna wind up probably losing this next wave to the tower.
And lose a good bit of it. He had to use purification beads there, and it still didn't save him. So he'll even be a bit more vulnerable if there is more attention from Dignitas in these next 110 seconds or so. But I think you were right. You're saying we haven't seen much from QvoFred, and I think it's just because the Anvil of Dawns haven't been there, but that's about to change. BaRRaCCuDDa, no beads. It'll be hard for him to get away from this one. He walls him off and isolates him next to Ataraxia. One more kill on the board for Dig.
BaRRa didn't even get a chance to come back to lane, and what seemed like a little bit more of an oopsie-daisy on that first pick is now turned into a full-fledged problem here for Spacestation. This dual lane is what was keeping them above water against Dignitas, I think, and for BaRRa to start falling behind now, Dig have made it evident that they're looking to shut down any sort of problem that might begin to surface.
Just like that, the experience lead has now moved slightly in Dig's favor, about 1,000 gold too. Certainly not the end of the world, but as he said, that advantage they intentionally built up for themselves. Cyno spent a good amount of time left side jungle trying to help BaRRaCCuDDa if they needed ganks. has been stripped away just in 2 quick fights from Dignitas. They do such a good job responding to the opponent's game plan. And now they want to fight on the right-hand side. Variety has Cyno low, or maybe it's Cyno that has Variety low. Aqua gets the kill credit, and now they need to keep QvoFred away, but the hammer lets him escape and find the kill. But I don't know if he can make it back to the tower, especially not now that the slow has landed. Aqua should clean that up easy.
2-for-1 exchange ultimately there for Dignitas. That's going to open up a little bit of wiggle room though in mid lane. Andinster could come under fire here. Hurriwind gonna drop the Desert Fury entirely, but a nice purification beats to cleanse Andinster from Trix's grasp, and that's gonna be an immediate back for the Muzen comp, but still gives Dignitas room to kind of keep trying to push forward there in mid.
Now, for what it's worth, this is the part of the game that I would say Spacestation usually play pretty well. It feels like what happens is that when they get towards that mid to late game, when they've got to transition from, a lot of the times, early leads, they have a hard time closing it out right. They make maybe just one bad call around an FG or a push, and they end up losing games.
It's usually... It feels a little bit more like a mixture of calls, so maybe it's just a kind of muddled comms there for Space Station in past sets. I'm mostly referencing Phase 1 here, where I'm sure we can all think of instances as Andinster trying to make sure to stay away, but QvoFred's going to look to collapse, and
I love the
sure
idea.
enough, there's only so much that Andinster can do. Tries to get the cripple off to prevent the Khepri from actually grabbing him, but unfortunately, it was just too little too late. Qvo's double tap on the hammer is what really signed off Andinster's fate there.
Absolutely, even without it, even without the stun from the Anvil of Dawn, that's actually 2 ganks who seem to go well without that initial stun. So QvoFred still getting plenty of value out of Thor. They're going to take it right to Value Town. It's Gold Fury on the menu as Dignitas pull, but Jeff moves in. It's not enough to steal. Epic Uppercut allows him to reposition, but Dig already got what they came for. That's Gold Fury down.
Valiant effort, though. Half the head is JeffHindla there for trying to salvage that engagement there for Space Station. Unfortunately, it's just too little too late by the time the Kumbhakarna tries to interfere, and Dignitas trusting Hurriwind and Ataraxia to have the confirmation there, able to find it out.
And remember, y'all, we got these mid-season changes in here now. If you don't watch SML and console like we do, and you've been getting acclimated to them all week, then welcome. We got a lot of really cool new stuff for him, and the first bit of that is this new Arthurian item tree that we see built so much that's starting up there for Aqua. He's going to be building this into the Pride Wind almost without a doubt, and I wouldn't expect him to be the only one that builds it this game.
It's such a staple warrior item at this phase, especially for a lot of soul laners and supports alike, but right now it's about the Trixtank trying to escape from Cyno, investing for that set ultimate, but just unable to fully close out on the kill. Not enough damage at level 11.
Couldn't quite take him down. Trixtank somehow makes it back out of there, but looks like they want to keep threatening the tier 1. They've got to be careful because QvoFred is near. He's considering Cyno as the target who's back towards the tower, does force out the beads and makes him retreat, so they can just turn right back towards Aqua. Lord of the Afterlife allows him to get away, and both of them survive.
Could definitely understand the decision-making there from QvoFred. Even though Aquarius looked like a better option since he was actually diving the T1 tower, he was about to go into the Osiris corporeal form where he was just going to be moving through all the walls, as we saw at the very end there where Aquarius is able to completely immune the stun that would have originally happened. Cyno, at least Qvo would be able to force the purification beads to set in place the next engagement, because that's going to force Space Station to have to play a little bit more passive. They can't necessarily afford to be as forward-facing whenever they're moving through the jungle, especially not Cyno now that he doesn't have those beads.
He's going to have to be careful in these next 2 engagements, as you're saying, Taco. But to go back to the previous conversation, a lot here is different. Thor, even himself, obviously has some big changes on into his kit. His third ability is no longer that extended duration spin. It's much shorter now, lower cooldown. JeffHindla is going to be on cooldown as well. They catch him out in the middle lane, and QvoFred is the one that finishes the kill off. Kumbhakarna is going to have to take a seat.
Didn't even stand a chance there. That double tap is just disgusting, the way that it is chunking away at Space Station right now, because Jeff's the tank, and he's still taking half of his health.
And it's not, compare that to Trixtank, right? And how he was able to get away from Cyno, despite being stuck in his grasp for actually a good amount of time near that tier 1 tower. So far, I think we have seen a little bit more from QvoFred than from Andy, as there is some trouble here in the middle lane. I thought about Andy a little bit because he was the one being attacked, but I meant QvoFred compared to Cyno. But Thor's done a little bit more for Dignitas here so far, and now he wants to join them on the solo side. Again, the ult out of range, so he used it just to close the gap.
Little unfortunate there for Trixtank. Could definitely, or excuse me, Qvo. Definitely tell he's fiending for more, but Dignitas might be able to find it, forcing back Spacestation, opens up the doorway for a Pyromancer pool, but an epic uppercut to prevent QvoFred from looking towards that objective any longer.
The objective defense goes a little bit better for JeffHindla this time as he moves in to stop them on Pyro, and Spacestation actually grab it for themselves in the back end. That's a nice win to keep this game close within striking distance. Only about 1,000 gold now, Taco, between these two teams.
Dignitas might have looked to pull that trigger a little bit too soon, having just recently invested some decent resources for that solo side gank. Qvo just... The second that Qvo has to back off, the rest of Dignitas seems fairly uninterested in continuing the engagement.
And because of that, they end up losing the Pyromancer. Credit to JeffHindla for getting in there first and helping his team get time to move into position to contest the objective. So finally, the Arthurian item tree conversation I've been so desperate to have. We can move back to it. Pride win there for Aqua, and it looks like one even being considered now for Trixtank, but that's not even the only item you can build out of it. Staff of Myrmidon is very strong as well. Fail Not, the Hunter crit item, we've seen get a little bit of play too. We haven't seen as much from Arendite. I doubt we'll see that one happening here today, but those other ones could potentially show up.
Jeff also looks like he's about to invest into a Pride win here on this Kumbhakarna, and that reflect damage could be rather important, especially when you factor in how annoying Kumbha already is with this hard crowd control lockdown. And the crowd control is another topic point I wanted to bring up here, Finch, because as far as the AoE presence is concerned, normally I would have given the advantage to Dignitas, but BaRRa on this Morrigan does provide some leverage for Spacestation, since they could essentially have a Zhong ultimate of their own.
That's a good point. It's a lot riding on the way that BaRRaCCuDDa uses that Changeling ultimate here on the Morrigan to find some value for them here in these next few engagements. He's got the Bumba's Mask completed. That's a huge item for Morrigan to do exactly this type of thing that she's doing now with the help from Cyno. They brought Ataraxia down low already, but Trixtank's there with the Scarab's Blessing. Kill potential been cut in half, but BaRRaCCuDDa procs the Scarab's Blessing, and now he might be in some trouble even with the damage from Cyno. And an Aegis there from BaRRaCCuDDa in the back end. They don't get what they were looking for.
Problem for BaRRa is that he has that Rangda's mask, and he's taking a little bit of extra damage here in comparison to usual, so he can't really afford to just absorb the full extent of Ataraxia's damage out of the Zhong, but with Dignitas having successfully saved the life of Ataraxia, they're just going to immediately pull the Gold Fury.
Well, it's Jeff in first hit again. QvoFred keeps the objective leashed, and they secure the Primal Fury, and now JeffHindla might be too far forward without any way to maneuver, but they can't get the last hit in. The Pillar did too much. Hurriwind does at least get it with the Desert Fury, but now that means an overcommit, and Ataraxia falls as well, 1 for 1, but it was Dig who got the Primal.
BaRRa is zooming right now, trying to see if he can hunt down QvoFred or Hurriwind, but both of them managed to make it into the safety of their T2 towers. Same can't be said, though, for Variety, who might have just gone a little bit too deep for his liking, and he tries to follow up with the Stinger. Aquarius looking to close out, but he just can't find the autos.
He doesn't have quite enough damage. It's so difficult to take down a King Arthur, and now Aqua's gone too far. He saw red there a little bit and ends up overcommitting, and Dignitas punished with yet another kill there in the middle lane.
That just felt so stubborn from Aquarius.
Yep.
I understand up to a certain point where you can chase him into the T2 tower. You invest your Lord of the Afterlife, and you still don't find the kill, but Andy at least had the follow-up with the Stinger, so it looks kind of cool in the process. But to keep going is where you need to factor in a little bit more player discipline. Kind of uncharacteristic of Aquarius, honestly.
It is. We don't often see that. We do often see Aqua make plays, though, so maybe he felt like he was in a position where he had to try and make something happen for the team, and instead ends up overextending. This fight bad, though, for Spacestation already. JeffHindla in the passive, and he's cleaned up. They'll turn their attention towards BaRRaCCuDDa, who turns to the Zhong, but Ataraxia removes, and BaRRaCCuDDa already gone. Scarab's Blessing keeps Hurriwind in the fights. They find one more kill. Andinster at the very least gets Ataraxia, but 3 for 1. Dig take that every day.
And it might not be over just yet, Finch. Andinster looking like he's about to join the rest of Spacestation over in the fountain. That is until an Aegis buys him enough walking space from Variety, who doesn't seem interested in diving that T1 tower any further. But again, the breakdown, this set has not been able to find those pick opportunities with Trixtank on the Khepri.
It has been really, really tough for Cyno so far.
It's twice now.
I think to make this set work, you're exactly right. And even in situations where he's had his target isolated, he hasn't even been able to finish the kill. The Khepri is going to make his job a nightmare. So often, these characters thrive on that one moment where they can catch someone out of position. But like you said, Khepri has an erase button, basically, and and just goes back and says, no, you don't.
Another massive issue for Cyno as well is the fact that he needs to be within melee range. BaRRaCCuDDa also kind of needs to be a little bit closer than what most mages or hunters
Yeah,
might have to actually get. And for QvoFred, that's just tasty. Every single time he's up in the air with that Anvil of Dawn, if he sees Cyno or BaRRa trying to commit to a target, which has typically been Ataraxia or Hurriwind, all he has to do is come crashing down on top of them, and that's pretty much a 2-for-1 special in case Ataraxia is even in threat of dying. I mean, sometimes he's not even there.
It does seem like the clumped up fights could favor Dignitas a little bit better. King Arthur and the Zhong both pretty good in those fights, and everyone's all near each other. Even Thor, as you said, thrives there as well, and then the Khepri to keep the stragglers alive on the back end of that. So Space Station are going to have to figure some kind of way to pivot, I think, with their strategy in this one, and see if there's a chance they can isolate maybe Trixtank himself and not give him a chance to res someone and then remove them from the fight. They do want to try and force this, though. It's going to be around the Pyromancer. Variety's here, but he can't make it in time. Space Station, at the very least, find the objective on the right-hand side.
Love seeing this aggression, though, from Space Station, choosing not to back down even when Dignitas are staring them down the barrel of the gun, essentially. But Dig, being the Dignitas that we all know and love, definitely looking to strike back with this T1 tower. Kind of an awkward grouping, though, since Space Station have chosen to respond, still have all 5 members hovering around this mid lane area.
JeffHindla moves in first. Mez ends up landing early on. Ataraxia is the target, but from this range, they don't have enough follow-up. It's like you said, Taco, they need to be in close. QvoFred's gone up into the air, and now's his time to look for a dunk. He lands on Aqua to cut him off, and there's the res from Trixtank to keep Ataraxia alive yet again. Aqua's been removed too, a double now for Variety, and BaRRaCCuDDa wants to get in close, wants to keep the fight going, but he doesn't have enough. That's a triple for Variety to keep the fight going. Dig, find 4, only 1 there for Space Station. This has been all Dig.
But andinster, the lone on Muzen, he's not going to have a chance to push inwards. Luckily enough for him, since Dignitas lost Ataraxia, they don't seem all that interested in pulling the Fire Giant right away. Rather, Dignitas would just take this opportunity to try and push out the waves as far as possible, and he's going to look to defend solo for a little bit, but Hurriwind has all the time in the world to just look to soak up as much farm as possible, and even still, Dignitas, they might have just been waiting for andinster to back off because they're moving right back to this Fire Giant, no problem, Finch.
I think so. They just wanted to back heal up a little bit and then come to start this Fire Giant up. And andinster, I know he wants to get the information and maybe go for a steal, but this could potentially be trouble for this B. He does have JeffHindla here nearby. They're trying to stall Dignitas as the Fire Giant gets low. Epic Uppercut's already been used. JeffHindla mezzes the 2 in the back line as well, but sitting on top of andinster the whole time has been 1 more from Dig, and they keep him away. They grab the FG, but Space Station still want the fight. It's Aqua who goes into the back line. Hurriwind is the target, removes him early on.
Kivo, though, going to make sure to respond and take out Space Station's mid laner as well. andinster's already down for the count. Variety trying to spin away on this King Arthur. BaRRaCCuDDa closing the gap pretty fast thanks to that rain, but it's still not enough.
I don't know if I would have... Well, now they've decided not to keep the chase, that's fine, but a good fight from Space Station, all things considered, that could have easily gone a lot worse for them. So at the very least, they find 1 pick, even though the Fire Giant goes down. Now they can move back and grab 1 more objective. The Oni Fury will be their consolation prize. They've given up the FG. But Taco, could that have gone any better for Space Station? I don't know if they could have stolen that one. They did their best just to stall.
They did do their best to stall. By the way, I've been trolling. I don't know why I always want to call Boomba's Raindas, man.
Oh, sure. No problem. We all know.
We all know what I'm trying to say. My brain isn't working this morning, guys.
Yeah, no problem. As right now, Space Station's game plan isn't working. Dignitas holding on to about a 5,000 gold lead. And now with the Fire Giant around their waist, they can start expanding that. There's still all 3 Tier 2 towers up, plus a Tier 1 in the long lane. They can add quite a bit of extra gold to their pockets. And as we mentioned earlier, the Pride wins have now started to come online. 2 for Space Station, 1 there for Trix. Things could potentially get even scarier.
But even with all this tankiness from Space Station, their front line is still being folded. And it's simply because of the fact that Space Station just has to get too close. That melee range is just working against them. Normally, it's a plus whenever your whole team is able to swarm around the priority target. But for Space Station, that's actually a negative since you're having to work against the likes of Cuvo, the likes of Ataraxia. There's just so much chaos taking place on both the front line and the back line. It's not giving Jeff very many opportunities to be able to make a consistent decision because poor Jeff, he has to decide between do I peel or do I initiate? But if he initiates, then there's no one left to protect andinster and Cyno.
They end up in trouble on the backside as over the wall goes Cyno to get away from Variety. Near that speed buff. That's the left side tier 2, mid tier 2. And they'll head right on over to right as well. I can't think of a good reason not to. And go ahead and start burning this tower down. I almost wonder if this blink for JeffHindla has become a bit of a trap for them. Even when he does blink in and good mezzes, there's not enough good follow-up from range. The clones from Psycho are good poke. Even Andinster has some. But for the most part, to do their real heavy-duty business, they need to get up close.
I kind of wish Space Station would have opted for some defensive relics, or counter-initiation relics would be a better way to put it. 2 shells in place of the Thorns and the Blink from Aquarius. And I would have probably been a pretty big fan of what Space Station is working with. But my biggest issue is that there isn't really a chance for Space Station to truly 5v5 against Dignitas. It's more so been Dignitas kind of just taking advantage of whoever has to be the first one in from Space Station. And then it's just a slow dominoes effect for the rest of the team fight. It's just a 1-by-1 pick away. And Digger just juggling Space Station around no problem.
JeffHindla starts the fight off with a blink into the mez, but yet again, he's the furthest one forward and there's not much follow-up. QvoFred doesn't hit the initial stun, but a good wall cuts Jeff off, and he's easy pickings. That felt a bit desperate there from Space Station to maybe find a single target to pick at red, and instead they lose the fight.
I do respect that, though, because if you're going to catch Dignitas off guard, I'm sure that it was a little bit of a bamboozle to see Jeff running at them, getting ready to invest his entire kit to see if there would be any sort of follow-up from his team. But now, in the 4v5 situation, Jeff will be responding in about 15 seconds or so. So luckily, Space Station should have him for the mid-Phoenix defense. This left side, though, well, looking a little bit questionable.
This one could certainly be in trouble. Aqua and Cyno and Andinster are the only ones in position to defend. Aqua's been pulled in by the Abduct, and just like that, removed. Hurriwind gets the kill very early on. Now Frenzy popped. Cyno has to use Aegis. That buys him a moment to at least get back to the Phoenix line. And for what it's worth, Dignitas are actually a bit low, brought down to about half HP in just about all of them. I think Space Station might have done just enough to buy themselves some time.
Dignitas just didn't have that Fire Giant any longer to work with. And even when they had it, not on the ideal candidates for the tower push. So Dig, while it's worth the attempt, it's kind of like a damage check in a sense to see if you, because if you can siege that left side Phoenix without taking the Fire Giant, that would have really put Space Station in a tough position to try and make the decision between defending or just looking to push out waves for the Phoenix defense as opposed to the Fire Giant. But Dick still have plenty of space to work with, and Finch, every single time, it's the same story, written before you even have to open the book.
It does seem as though you can tell how these fights are going to go. Trixtank is very far forward, zoning as Fire Giant has been started. It still will not be enhanced at this point in the game, but I don't think Dig are going to feel too bad about it. A nice Fire Giant earned by all the pressure they've gotten on the map, and Space Station have to fall back. I do want to point out some of these items, though. 3 Mantle of Discords picked up, even 1 for Ataraxia to add a bunch of tankiness there for him. And we saw Variety pick up the Contagion. That's one of our new anti-heal items, the Fizz defense one that allows them to still get that same anti-heal like Pestilence.
But the Mantles make perfect sense, and they can afford it. All that thought, though, because JeffHindla going to blink in, look for the mez, but there's just no follow-up aggression from Space Station. No one else really close enough to try and deal any damage, and no one really able to deal any damage, period. That would even be relevant.
All the way into the Phoenix they go. Andinster in a little bit of trouble. The epic uppercut forced out from JeffHindla to try and lock down Ataraxia, but at this point, he's as tanky as everyone else. Ends up getting the Mantle proc. That finds him 2 stuns. Scarab's Blessings there as well to buy him some time to retreat. He doesn't get the actual reset on it, but he is still alive. Space Station not only defend the Phoenix, they want to come fight outside the Phoenix, pushing into the jungle and forcing Dig back.
This is the chase that Space Station needed, though. If they're going to find a time to strike, it's now, but QvoFred still lurking on that right side. Has to be cautious. They're treading water right now. And I like this from Space Station, that they're backing off. They could have chosen to keep giving chase, but the deeper it goes into the jungle, the more unlikely it is that Space Station can keep control of how the team fight's actually spiraling.
So instead, they Step on the brinks. They'll come over to the right-hand side as Dignitas feign as if they're backing up, but sustain a little bit off the FG, and they look to re-siege. Ultimate's back up for andinster and JeffHindla. Aqua kept his, so they should have some work to do here on this defense. Trixtank has to fall back. Not looking to tank the Phoenix just yet. They actually send QvoFred to mid to try and keep the wave pushed up. Remember, he can rotate over any time with the Anvil of Dawn.
Definitely hurts, though, for Aquarius to not have those thorns to utilize any longer. The fact that he wasn't able to find a pick onto Hurriwind or Ataraxia just means that Dig have a little bit more space to work underneath this Phoenix.
Variety blinks and doesn't find much. Cubo's up, Cubo's down, and Aqua's the target, and now he's a memory. He's been removed quite quickly. QvoFred is doing his best to try and get out of the fight. Trixtank low as well, forcing the Scarab's blessing, but Variety putting in work with help from Ataraxia. That's 4 members down already. It's just JeffHindla left. I can't see a reason why Dignitas can't just push in now.
Dig have to wait for the wave, though. They're all just too low. Ataraxia getting a little bit of sustain from that Fire Giant buff itself, but you've got to be careful here. Ataraxia might be looking to heal off the next creep wave. Jeff, though, can't afford to give up his life. Otherwise, that's 30 seconds for Dignitas to look to close out.
Yeah, they just don't have that much damage at this point. JeffHindla gets the Mez, and it's really only the one that has the Phoenix aggro that lives, but Ataraxia cuts the distance with the blink. JeffHindla should die as a result, but I think he might have bought them enough time. I don't know if they can end with just the 3, but they're going to go for it anyway. It's not too long before Aqua's up. 6 seconds, and the Osiris will be here to defend, and that's why Dignitas rethink it. They don't have enough with just these 3 to take the game.
For a second there, I thought Dignitas were just going to look to get as much Titan damage as they possibly could, but recognizing that it's just not worth the risk. They can just sit it out and wait for the next Fire Giant to respawn. Keep in mind, it will be an enhanced Fire Giant now that we have ticked past that 30-minute mark, but BaRRaCCuDDa has come in clutch there. Despite that right side Phoenix still having gone down, if Barra doesn't kill Hurriwind and Hurriwind and Cuvo on the backside there at the same time, that would have most likely been the game end. The fact that Barra was able to kill Hurriwind, that's all that Spacestation have to continuously pick in order to try and continue salvaging these team fights, because without Hurriwind, Dignitas do lose a lot of their push power.
And don't lose track of how far ahead Dignitas are and were, right? This should be a much easier Phoenix siege for them than has been, but Spacestation actually done a really good job defending. I do want to give a good amount of credit to Cyno, too. I think he's had quite a bit of damage in these fights that has deterred Dignitas. They've also, I don't think they've been using everything as optimally as they could have been. There have been some times where Dig have been maybe a bit not on the same page, a little bit to clean up when they make their next push.
I think it's been a little bit more carefree from Dignitas. Them kind of just assuming that Spacestation might be willing to give up more pressure than what they actually are, and so it seems to be kind of catching Dignitas off guard. Even before the successful push to take the Phoenix, Dignitas did not seem... They were rather slow at disengaging into the jungle. I'll put it that way. And if they continue giving Spacestation chances, then they've got to be careful, because there is a chance that Spacestation could turn this one around with one solid team fight.
Aqua is in a bit of trouble. He's been rooted. He's now been abducted. So that's JeffHindla's time to move into the back line. Frenzy has been popped as well. The ultimate comes out, though, from JeffHindla pretty early to look for the knockup, but can't find much. Instead, it's QvoFred who comes dunking back down, and they find 2 kills. Hurriwind gets Jeff, and Cyno joins him. A nice wall from Cuvo to slow down the retreat from Spacestation. But what about on the backline? BaRRaCCuDDa is getting work done. He's found another double kill, taking down Hurriwind and Ataraxia, and he's still half health.
But Barra's having to work against the fire minions and all of the spam from Dignitas to boot. Variety's going to get that Scarab's blessing from Trixtank to save him just in the nick of time. Barra will finally wind up falling. So a nice hammer tap out of QvoFred. But 2 members still left standing here for Spacestation, and Dignitas lose both of their carries yet again.
They're having so much trouble winning these fights cleanly. I was just looking at the build for both of these mid lane hunters, and neither one of them have put any lifesteal into the build. I know when you're a mid hunter that it's a bit different, but I wonder if some sustain might help out with some of the survivability too, as BaRRaCCuDDa, if he can get to the back line, he's killing somebody.
All that power pen, baby. I think that Hurriwind might be considering a Bloodforge at this stage. Same thing for andinster, though. Both of these hunters could realistically work a Bloodforge into their builds and be better for it, but I'm not against seeing them without sustain. I think that the andinster and Hurriwind both kind of understand that their sole purpose in these engagements is to try and get their damage off, because either way, both of them are just dying to the same thing. It's Zhong damage, time and time again.
That's so true, isn't it? Either on both sides, someone has a Zhong blinking to the backline, doing way more damage than you can take, so that's a pretty funny way to look at it. As you're right, BaRRaCCuDDa's had a great game so far on this Morrigan, despite that bit of a stumble that they had early on in the laning phase. After their first 2 kills, they started getting ganked and BaRRa fell behind. He's come back for them in a pretty major way here in this game.
And keep in mind, that engagement looked ugly for Spacestation.
Yes, that looked real bad.
They brought that one back from the depths by BaRRaCCuDDa's will alone, it seems like.
Oh, it's Cyno now, though, who's looking to try and make a play. He's way on the back end of the Fire Giant, but they recognize he's there, and so they just drop the objective instead. That's the ultimate out from Hurriwind. He didn't find much. Kuvo goes to the back line, but they know he's here. Even with that upgrade, the Mjolnir's not enough, and andinster finds the first kill. QvoFred has been brought down. Spacestation are a man up, but these health bars are so low. BaRRaCCuDDa gets Ataraxia as well, and suddenly it's a 5v3.
Variety trying to track down BaRRaCCuDDa, but he's just too fast.
Wow.
The Boombas, and he is jetting on out of there. A successful team fight for Spacestation that puts them into a power play now for this enhanced Fire Giant.
Wow,
Plus
man.
that right side Phoenix restoration. BaRRa is doing everything in his willpower right now, Finch, to prevent Dignitas from having their way on the enhanced Fire Giant, on these right side Phoenix sieges, even in the straight up jungle team fight. His positioning has just been so crucial here.
Yeah, and I picked the wrong thread coming into that fight, right? I was like, well, how's things going to go with Cyno on the back line? Turned out he didn't do much at all. That was the BaRRaCCuDDa show yet again, and I have been loving the way that Jeff's playing it. Now we're moving into the FG. It's at about half HP, but Spacestation are going to leash it. They want to take the fight instead, but Aqua's right on top of this ring. That's a lot of free damage he's taken for no reason. Hurriwind is able to pick up Cyno. andinster is in trouble from the Desert Fury. Aegis keeps him alive. They trade the kill back. It's 1-for-1 in this skirmish.
But Variety won't be able to track down andinster in the end there. Misses the chance to confirm the kill thanks to a nice time Aegis. But Aquarius and BaRRa, more importantly, is going to go down. The Berserker's Barrage. Kuvo manages to find him.
Now Aqua's in some trouble too. Even there with the Mez, QvoFred has a wall, and that ends up being a bit better. 3 kills go down in favor of Dig. Only 1 for Spacestation, and they might even be able to make that 4 if they can catch up to JeffHindla, proc the passive, and find another clean kill. And this is what I was talking about earlier, where Spacestation gets so close, and it feels like one fight rips it away.
Andy's got to be careful. Kuvo's going to be the first one to find him, but the beautiful Thor wall to prevent an escape route for Andy.
That's it.
And that's a clean D-side. Cyno's up in 14, though. This is a siege with Dignitas not having their Hunter Hurriwind. Finch, I don't know if this is over just yet.
That's true. Without Hurriwind, they have a lot less damage onto this structure, and Cyno will be here soon, but it is just Cyno. How much can he do up against 4? And once the Phoenix is down, their damage becomes very relevant again up against the Titan. It's up to Cyno on the set. 17 seconds till he has any backup coming in at all. QvoFred dunks in once. Cyno's gone. That's the Deicide, and Dignitas move into the Titan room. But do they have the health bars to tank this up and get the actual kill? BaRRaCCuDDa is now back up as well to come join the fray. He forces them off, and I think Spacestation might have held on. No, it cost him his life. BaRRaCCuDDa's down, but Spacestation are still in it.
Sacrifice was not in vain, however. Aquarius and JeffHindla got just enough seconds at the very end there to respawn, so Mid-Phoenix will go down. But the Titan is still standing here, Finch, and Dignitas as well. They might have gotten 2 solid picks onto Cyno and BaRRaCCuDDa, but these enhanced Fire Giants are starting to get rather 50-50 between these 2 teams.
But this still all comes back to me to that fight around the FG. I don't think that they were 50-50ing around that objective. Instead, they turned that into kind of a bad fight for themselves. I don't like where they stopped on the ring around the Fire Giant at all, Taco.
I don't think they were happy with it either,
Well, sure.
to be fair, Finch, but this is kind of what you were talking about at the very start of this match, where Spacestation, they played their early to mid pretty confidently. It's just when they start to trickle later and later that they seem to start second-guessing themselves a little bit more so in terms of committing to the objective or committing to the team fight.
And that does mean that Dignitas are the ones who grab the enhanced Fire Giant pretty cleanly. They've gotten 3 of them up to this point. QvoFred has dunked in. Aqua's low, but he actually tanked up quite a good bit of damage. Stinger from Andy does land a QvoFred that forces the Scarab's Blessing out from Trixtank. Cyno tries to go to the back line. He does set up for andinster to get Hurriwind. That makes it a 1-for-1 trade. Into the back line, they make another trade. JeffHindla gets Qvo, but andinster drops 2. It's 2 against 2, and 3 up on both.
This is a clown fiesta right now, Finch, between these two
What's going
teams.
on?
They cannot make a decision, but Spacestation just continue to force buying time for themselves up against the Dignitas, and Hurriwind being dead a little bit longer, and Qvo as well. Qvo's alive. There's still a little bit of push power there, I feel, from Dignitas, but missing both of those physical damage dealers to try and take down these Phoenixes, they're going to have to wait. Dignitas will have to wait out the full 30 seconds until they have their entire team together again, and that is precious time to lose on these enhanced FGs. Dignitas needs at least one more Phoenix before I think that they can really feel confident about trying to storm Space Station's Titan room.
Well, this late game that we're moving into, we're 39.5 minutes into game number 1. That feels good for both of these teams, I would imagine. Have a time to start finishing off these 6 items, to start selling boots, picking up that elixir of speed, and then to start moving into another one. I mean, take a look at Hurriwind. He's gone into the Aussie. We mentioned the lack of lifesteal earlier. He has made a change there. Variety got rid of the boots already. I think it was the Bulwark he picked up in that slot to round his build out. Space Station have brought this game back pretty much to parity. It's just who has the Fire Giant any given moment that feels like the biggest difference.
I don't even feel like that's a difference at this stage either, Finch. With the way that these team fights have gone, it really does feel like a coin flip right now as to who's going to come out on top. But one thing is for sure, Dignitas cannot afford to make mistakes on these base sieges because these timers are only getting longer and longer, and even with Space Station missing their current mid-Phoenix, it's still relatively easy to try and toggle between the two, between mid or left side lane, and Dig just can't really afford to send somebody by themselves on right because of Cyno.
Dignitas now with 5 members, or 4 on the left-hand side. Qvo has moved to mid. This is good timing. They can keep a Fire Wave pushed up and threaten mid-Phoenix once it respawns, while having their team in left to threaten there too. This is going to make it a hard defense for Space Station.
Qvo, though, not willing to take any chances up against BaRRaCCuDDa. Sees that Morrigan invest into the Invis form and immediately backs right off, and for good reason as well. The Polynomicon from BaRRa has come up more times than I can count as a clutch for Space Station, because that boosted in-hand damage really goes places for a team who's on the losing end of a team fight.
Yeah, you'll feel it as mid-Phoenix goes back down yet again. A good rotation from Dig. Catches Space Station in between. QvoFred is in the air, trying to decide on a target and where he can land, but now that he's hesitated, he comes right back down in place. Desert Fury committed onto Aquarius. That forces him to use the Lord of the Afterlife in order to retreat. The left Phoenix still healthy for the time being. Now Digger pushing in, and I think Space Station might have given it up. The left Phoenix now down as well.
Little by little, Dignitas are managing to create more and more space for themselves to work with. With 2 Phoenixes, that's 2 different minion waves that are going to be pouring in now for Space Station to try and defend. Keep in mind, Dignitas does have a decent amount of AoE damage also because of Ataraxia, so Space Station have to be on top of clearing out these fire waves. They can't afford to let their Titan take too much damage, otherwise Dignitas will just dive.
They're going to move over to the right side Phoenix instead, while they have minion waves pouring in to force Space Station to split their focus. Right side Phoenix now at half HP. Wall keeps Aqua away from the dive that he wants to take, but JeffHindla has popped the Frenzy. They want to start this fight now. Variety blinks in as well to try and deter, but JeffHindla responds with an ultimate to keep Trixtank out. Cyno is trying to stick in the back line, but a nice Scarab's Blessing and Hurriwind's damage takes him down quickly. This is all looking like Dignitas. A double kill for Hurriwind. QvoFred dunks into the back line. He's got andinster running away. Another kill for the Thor. Even with Desert Fury, Hurriwind's into trouble, but he keeps JeffHindla away too. That's a deicide, and that's game 1 for Dignitas. They should just go in.
Dignitas already know, and the looks on Space Station's faces tell it all as well. It was a hard-fought battle there at the very end, but losing that left side Phoenix just put too much pressure onto Space Station in the very end. A good try, though. Definitely a solid attempt there from Space Station on the defense, and honestly, Finch, straight up, looking at Space Station right now from this game-win performance, I'm excited for the rest of the set.
I am too. Welcome to Phase 2, ladies and gentlemen. What a start to all this action here. Space Station Gaming, what, 8th from the first phase? I mean, they were down in the bottom, struggling to find any wins against anyone that wasn't Trifecta and LG, taking Dig all the way to 40+ minutes in this game. I've been impressed.
I think what's more impressive is the fact that I was really not sold on that Space Station composition in comparison to what Dignitas have been able to draft for themselves. It really felt rather imbalanced towards Dignitas' side of things, but for Space Station to have so many successful team fights, I think that just goes to show that the communication issues that were there in Phase 1 pretty clearly seem to have been a little bit more sorted out.
A little bit more, but I still think both these teams have some potential to clean up from what we saw from them in Game 1, which just means that we probably got a really good set ahead of us here, Taco. We got plenty more coming y'all's way. Going to be a quick break, and we'll be right back.
What up, demons? It's your boy, Tom Battinger, and after game number 1, I'm ready for game number 2. 40+ minutes, Totally. A lot of the games we've had are usually between that 20 and 30 mark, but when we get those good defensive sets like we saw out of Space Station for what it's worth, we get some of the longer matches.
It was 57 kills combined between these two teams. A great defensive front coming out of Space Station Gaming towards the end there. BaRRaCCuDDa making a lot of good plays on the Morrigan, transforming into Ataraxia Zhong. It just wasn't enough, I think, because of Cyno's set. I'm surprised that he even blocks the set, honestly, because of the way that the game panned out against the Zhong. You think of like gods like Serket or Nemesis to really try to isolate this god and put him out of the equation. Now, to be fair to Cyno, the way he started the game with that first blood was good. It just wasn't enough. But in this particular replay, the game was very even. It was only about 3,000 gold separating these teams at the 21-minute mark. But the problem was, after this fight, the 4-for-1 that Dignitas got was off of the back of Aqua's great engage, but he put himself so far out of position of the pull coming through from the Khepri.
And right there at the top, you saw like 3,000, 4,000 gold separating the teams. This is another look at that same fight. After this is what really broke the game open, to use your own words, Totally. This was the fight that Totally was really excited about, because this is the turning point of game number 1.
That's right. Ataraxia was out of position a little bit, but he got saved at the last second through Trixtank with a revive, and afterwards Dignitas were able to really capitalize with that Scarab's Blessing. You were mentioning how maybe there should have been an execute coming through from Cyno. The Alkwang was open, Achilles, even the Thanatos, but instead he picks set into the Khepri, something that he's been practicing and trying to make happen. It just didn't really work out in this first game.
Yeah, you know, you bring up those execute characters, and anytime you mention Thanatos, everybody likes to bring up the fact that he kind of falls off a little bit late game. And obviously, if you're looking to execute Zhong, character with a burst heal like that can be problematic, and that's going to kind of hold on even for the other characters that have the executes. But when it comes down to set, I understand there's a lot of raw damage, there's a lot of base numbers on there that allow you to theoretically chew through a tank. So Zhong, you mentioned some of the counters that we usually see, like Nemesis. You know, that certainly happens. But with respects to the executes, yeah, I don't know. The Khepri certainly seemed to make an impact.
Like, if I see a set on my team, I want to pair that up with a Giannis to be able to get in and out of the action. And also the gods, not only the Khepri that he was against, but gods like Anhur with the obelisk slow, Thor with the stunning wall from a distance. It's very difficult as a set player to get into that backline and do your duties as a jungler.
Well, as we get into picks and bans for game number 2, the question I'm going to ask, you've focused on this set selection. Was it the picks and bans that kind of separated these two teams?
I don't think so, because they made the set work. They ganked Ataraxia at level 4, got that first blood, but then they tried to purple buff invade afterwards. He died afterwards, so they couldn't get that early game lead that they needed to.
But at the same time, I mean, 42-42, I think, was the timer when everybody on Space Station died, and we saw them walk into the throne room. I mean, at that point, Space Station had a great game up until that point. So the set wasn't the perfect selection, but Space Station certainly going that long with Dignitas is something to be positive about.
I agree, and a lot of that comes down to the Muzen Morrigan, their defensive measures to be able to clear that up. But the late game 5-on-5 fights outside of the Phoenixes, outside of the Tiny Room, did not favor Space Station Gaming. The Khepri, the Zhong, the Thor Global Pressure, it was just Dignitas pulling and pushing Space Station to their will.
Well done. Great analysis there from Anatoly. And as we move into game number 2, those are the things that we will keep in mind. And hopefully, for Space Station's many fans at home, the team keeps in mind as well. Bans coming through. Geb and Chronos, same from game number 1. The Arlong Shen there as well. But the Anhur going to be taken away by Space Station Gaming. By no means did Hurriwind single-handedly win this game, but the push that it provides early, the presence that it provides even late with a strong impale, the shifting sands is incredibly problematic in team fights, in the lane, in the jungle. I think people underestimate the Obelisk. Clearly Space Station don't, as they ban it away along with Thor.
It was buffed, actually, with this patch where it went from 65 ranged up to 70, so it's easier to land your combination of that impale. But even before that, teams were starting to ban away the Anhur from the Renegades, but Dignitas didn't get that memo during the MSI, so I think that's why they wanted to draft it in the first game.
Certainly sounds right there. One more ban. Team Dignitas on the clock. Variety giving it a thought over. Playing the King Arthur game number 1. I mean, he was the first one to show us what King Arthur was capable of, and boy, did we run fast to that balance room. But he certainly looked good even after the changes. Arthur these days at a pro level, I think, is in line with a lot of the other selections. Variety is one of the players that still makes it look like an absolute top pick.
I wanted to talk about Variety versus Aqua in that game because I think Variety got under Aqua's skin throughout the early laning phase to the point where later on in the game, I'm thinking back to 17 minutes when Aqua tower dives tier 2 just to try to kill Variety and gets heavily punished for it. Very uncharacteristic of Aqua to kind of make that play in a position where his teammates weren't ready to capitalize and either bail him out or at least trade him out.
As a solo laner, Toli, was there any sort of kill potential?
There was kill potential.
And so that, I'm going to cut you off on purpose because I'm happy about that. Obviously, it didn't work out the way, but Space Station Gaming need to be a little bit more aggressive, in my opinion. So if you're going to, get some bangs and bruises as you try to learn that playstyle, I'm all well and good. Muzen Cobb first pick for SSG. Dignitas respond with Zhong and Set.
I'm surprised that Dignitas stripping away the set. I don't think that Cyno had that kind of a presence with that god, that it was disruptive, that it kind of dissuaded Dignitas from getting that mid-game pressure off of that one Fire Giant fight.
Sometimes episode 1 foreshadows what could have happened. And I think Dignitas looked at Set and went, all right, Cyno, you almost did it. And we damn sure believe you can do it. So we're going to take it away from you just in case. You didn't win that race, but you certainly can win the next one. So I think they take that away. And the Skadi. I am excited to see this character because I'm not playing against it. I think this character has gone through transformations in the Midseason Invitational, the Midseason Patch. The big deal here, Anatoly, is the ultimate change.
That's right. You can now yeet Kaldir.
Is that the official terminology?
No, it's not. But it definitely should be.
It certainly is. So, for those of you, you just toss the doggy, right?
All the way like a targeter. It's going to be quite a sight to see for BaRRaCCuDDa up against the Skadi. Now, probably could be a Muzen middle. We're not entirely sure.
You could put Skadi mid.
That's true, too, actually.
That's the thing. Skadi, the two big deals. She had some love with respect to power she gains when the dog is dead, etc. Really, the thing here is that the ultimate, not only can you target and throw the dog, but also it will revive the dog. You used to have to be really micro in your play where he has 5 hit points, gets down to 4, ult, give him up to 5. Now, even when Calder is down for the count, you can bring him back and throw him in somebody's face. Once again, things only to do in gaming and not in real life. Second round bans coming out, and they're all tanky people. Khepri, Terra, Arthur, and Osiris banned out by Team Dignitas. Gotta love this Fafnir pick. Set and Skadi. Set and Skadi are both kind of ability-based in-handers.
Sure.
They're hybrid characters, and Fafnir is going to assist them in the late game when they need to lean on those in-hands.
Even though Set does have a passive that increases his attack speed, it's not that much to the point where you don't want a Fafnir on your team anyway. Skadi, without any sort of basic attack speed modifiers, you want that Fafnir. You need that Fafnir to control the Gold Furies and such, especially with all the space control that Fafnir and even Zhong are providing with their ultimates.
I would be very excited to see this. Olorun being hovered here by Spacestation Gaming, one of the newest characters in the game. His whole thing is mage carry, like traditional, I hate the term ADC, but we'll go with it. Those basic attacks are what he lands on. He's got some fun things. And Totally, what's different about him versus Kronos and the other guys?
Time dilation is going to be a big thing to slow things down. Now, he is a mage ADC, but he can crit as well. I was like trying to go through it until I could figure it out. But yes, the crit is a big deal. But what I'm really looking at is the counter matchup of Olorun versus Fafnir. Fafnir is transforming. He's going to transform much slower once he's under that ulti.
That's a big deal as well. You know, I was looking for the crit conversation, but I think you actually were really on the nose there. That time dilation and how it affects a lot of these things coming out. Zhong, we always talk about the delay between exorcism and the heal. Now it's going to be even more so. A ton of different things coming out here when it comes down to Olorun and the ultimate. And more importantly, I mean, this is the first time we get to see it. Just off the bat, do you expect them to do well at a pro level?
Hard to say against Dignitas because of how they played in that first game at that 22-minute mark. That one teamfight was just huge. So it's about protecting BaRRaCCuDDa on the Olorun. I do think it's going to go to him. Watching his streams, he's been practicing it quite often, so we wouldn't expect it to go into andinster's hands.
I'm excited. Like I said, new characters abroad. Skadi basically is a new character.
Yeah.
Olorun's going to be coming out, and we haven't even mentioned the Bug. Is a character that sees a lot of play in ranked, unless you're banning her like you should, especially in my games. But Cyno here, this is a hyper carry.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And a lot of slows to isolate the Zhong. The same way the Zhong was ganked in that first game, we're probably going to see the repeat in game number 2.
And with Set, I talked about how he can kind of chew through tanks. That's late game when those... Arachne, the passive is Chinsai. I mean, that's what's going on here. Yeah. So it works against the Zhong. He's got to waddle away, and it's certainly going to be interesting if he's slow. SSG looking to tie this series up. Finch and Taco bring us the action.
Well, it's time for game number 2 between these two squads that are apparently a little more evenly matched than we thought based on game 1. But this is bad news. JeffHindla in trouble already. Passive proc Ataraxia first blood on a Zhong. Well, that is exactly what you want to see if you're a Dig fan, and a bit of a nightmare if you're SSG.
Oh, no. Finch, I don't think that could have possibly gone any worse for the start of game 2 here for Spacestation, mostly because of the fact that it's Ataraxia who got that first blood credit. This Zhong already off to a strong start and trying to take full advantage of it too. Even had a chance to back to base still, get full HP, full mana before entering back to the lane.
And there's so many other storylines here that it would take a first blood in the first pre-seconds of the match to overwhelm it. But I mean, there's a lot to go here, Taco, so I'm going to set you up. Take this wherever you'd like to. Go.
Cyno's up to some shenanigans right now, Finch. He's already looking for that level 1 gank onto Hurriwind. Spiders are out. Beads are good, though, from Hurry, and he's not going to get anything.
At the very least, he got the purification bead, as you said, on this immobile Skadi. But that's one of these threads in the middle lane here, right? Is that we're finally getting to see Skadi with some of the changes get some action here in the at the SPL level. Obviously, there's the change with Calder when he goes down. She gets the bonus power. She can now use her ultimate from range as well. But look at Cyno's aggression. He wants this Arachne into the jungle, stripping away the red buff already. There's no way Hurry can rotate to this.
Trixtank tried his best to look for the defense, but it's just not possible. Spacestation now looking to disengage, but Ataraxia, since he is level 2, will be able to successfully defend his own purple buff. However, Aquarius on the opposite side will wind up losing that blue buff. So a nice invade from Qvo. Qvo just taking advantage of the fact that Cyno has been doing the complete opposite as far as jungle patterns are concerned.
That's right. He has a pretty good idea of where Cyno is at all times, so even if they can't stop him, the information is nice, and he's able to act based on that. But the Skadi mid's not the only thing. We've got Set in the long lane for variety. We've got BaRRaCCuDDa on this Olorun in the long lane over on left, as opposed to in the middle lane for andinster. It's all over the place with a bunch of new stuff here.
Finch, I am terrified, though, for andinster. JeffHindla is going to have to be on high alert for this mid lane, because if Hurriwind is left to his own devices, Skadi is going to win that trade-out for the boxing against AMC. I don't care what anyone says. You have Calder to shoot forward, and then whenever AMC finally managed to finish working through Calder's HP the first time, Winter's Grasp. You throw your dog. You literally yeet Calder to its target location.
It's in the tooltip, so that's exactly how it ends up happening. andinster could potentially have some trouble here in the 1v1 in the middle lane. And for what it's worth, I think a lot of people struggle in the 1v1 up against Skadi and her current form. She's so powerful in that 1v1 boxing that you've got to make sure that you can attack from multiple angles. And now BaRRaCCuDDa isolated. He does have the knockback and the self-heal, and that might have been enough, especially with JeffHindla blinking in. BaRRaCCuDDa's out.
Calder still looking to give chase, that is, until he's called back by Hurriwind. A nice interference there from JeffHindla, even expending the bullying just to fully ensure that Bear doesn't wind up dying early. This Olorun, though, could be massive for Spacestation. The ultimate is the real selling point. Yes. On Olorun. That time dilation just affecting everything inside of the field. It's so much to try and actually work through.
That's right. It covers a ton of space, slows everyone else that's inside it, and then speeds up everything Olorun does while he's in it. It's like a big slow field that everyone has to deal with, and also buffs him. It's very potent. Not to mention he's a pretty good mage ADC that can do plenty of damage in his own right. Oh, and we buried the lead. He can crit, by the way.
Lots of objective shred. I can confidently back that one up, no doubt. BaRRaCCuDDa is definitely a pretty solid Olorun player, too, from what I've seen. And I haven't seen too much of the Baron ranked, obviously, but a little bit that he has been willing to display has definitely been promising. It's exciting to see him on something new.
It is, and this is a bit opened up by this meta. This is one of my concerns for Olorun. You know, when I was initially hearing about him, was that he is so immobile in that long lane that he might be vulnerable. But when they're kind of left to their own devices over here, Olorun can feel pretty good.
But that's the thing, is Bear is going to be level 5. Well, scratch that. He is level 5, so the Sanctified Field is now online. And the big thing about that is QvoFred, if he looks for that classic Mystic Rush gank opportunity, Sanctified Field could just be enough to get BaRRaCCuDDa out of there every single time. The window of opportunity to really look to punish this Olorun would have been from the very start, levels 1 through 4. But since Qvo was trying to compensate for Cyno's aggression on the duo and mid side of the map by choosing to farm out all the Space Station solo side, well, it gave Qvo some great farm, but it also gave Bear plenty of time to hit level 5.
I imagine it's not an accident that Cyno was overly aggressive during that exact time period, so that does buy BaRRaCCuDDa a bit of time to get towards that ult. He also went with Aegis as his first relic over the Purification Beads. That does mean he won't have nearly as many options to get away from the roots and the hammers and the CC, but as far as immuning damage to buy time, he'll be fine in that regard.
He's just got to avoid that initial burst of damage from the Mystic Rush itself. I think that as long as Barrack can Aegis out that one ability, Sanctified Field should take care of the rest.
Should be A-okay. That's just one of the threads we're following. On the other side, Variety is on the right side looking aggressive up against Aqua. They force out the Dazzling Offensive and might even have some turnaround potential, but there's just not enough damage there from Cyno. I'm actually surprised he wasn't able to do more in that fight, and now Dignitas can move towards the blue buff to start grabbing it for themselves.
Kind of like a double whammy in a sense.
They're waiting.
Dignitas still looking for Cyno. Sent out the Sand Clone. Absolutely beautiful utilization there from Variety. Having that extra little bit of vision from the clone to give QvoFred the heads up. The Mystic Rush would be successful.
Able to land it, and Cyno didn't have any options. You could tell once he got hit by the Mystic Rush, he didn't even really expect that he was in that much trouble, and he ends up falling. He is going to go for that Golden Blade start for him. This is pretty core for Arachnes a lot of the time. It accelerates their clear speed by quite a bit. And while giving them some movement speed too, so maybe he can try and turn things around now.
I do want to clarify though, right before that pick on a Cyno even took place, I said it was a double whammy, and what I meant is that Dignitas was also able to re-establish control of their own buff side in the opposite side of the map. Since they have track of their red buff timer again, I don't really see much of a chance here for Space Station to try and pressure it out again, especially not with Cyno having just been picked off by Quvo. Things are relatively even so far between these two teams, but that gold lead is steadily building in Dignitas' favor.
And Skadi went pure just transcendence right off the start, and that's already finished in 24 stacks, under no duress, by the way, this whole time, so that's real scary. Trixtank forced into the Draconic Corruption early on, and will be able to leap away, but with Aqua going for a pincer maneuver, he might not be out for as free as he thinks. He's now been stunned. Cyno lands to look for even more CC, and that sets up for the first kill for Space Station Gaming. Epic Uppercut now allows for the disengage, so a nice fight for SSG.
Good rotation from Variety, but BaRRaCCuDDa could be in some trouble as Ataraxia wins the 1v1. A huge blow there to Space Station, and it's not over just yet. Variety could wind up falling himself.
He's used the Santa Clones already, too, to try and get some more damage off. That's why Cyno's retreating. JeffHindla gets hit as well. The mess is good, but broken immediately by Aqua. That means they're able to find 3 kills in total. Variety probably could have beat Aqua in the 1v1, but now that Andy's here, he'll go down as well. A nice stinger, and yet again, it's another bloodbath.
A blue buff defense, though, as well for Space Station, so I'm sure Aquarius will be happy about that one. But Cyno and JeffHindla being made the targets yet again here in Game 2, Finch. Dignitas they're trying to close out these fights as quickly as possible, but Space Station just barely keep holding on and keep making the rotations that matter most.
But the solo kill in duo lane is a huge problem right now for Space Station.
And that's also tracking everything back to that initial first blood that Ataraxia got at the very start of this game before the creep waves even went out. It's a big lead having that 400 gold advantage right away, because you're automatically going to have your boots online guaranteed faster than the enemy. Whoever's in duo lane, as far as BaRRa, since he's on the mage, I can't really call him a hunter here, but it's still to the same effect, you know? Ataraxia has maintained this steady 1.5 level lead over BaRRa, and it's kind of also forced BaRRa to have to play a little bit closer to his tower line. That was an aggressive stance from Ataraxia, a fight that was taking place midway up the lane, if not a little bit more so into Space Station side of things.
Ataraxia went the Pythagoras piece early on for a lot of extra HP. That's probably helping out too. JeffHindla forces the epic uppercut here in the middle lane. Trixtank happy to absorb that cooldown and fall back.
But that's exactly why Dignitas are content to just take all of these fights on solo, because if it's going to give Ataraxia more space to try and pressure out BaRRaCCuDDa, there's really not much Space Station can do about it, just like there's nothing Space Station can do about this Gold Fury.
Clean zoning from Trixtank, great timing from the team, and Dignitas grab a Gold Fury. But Space Station won't let them leave for free. They're going to reach to the cash register, and unfortunately for them, they won't like what's awaiting. That's 2 kills for Dig and only 1 for SSG. A double for QvoFred on the Ravana, and Dignitas out in front yet again.
That Sanctified Field, though, making it impossible.
Oh,
However,
he's very
Andy
good.
has no idea a Prana Onslaught's going to be enough to clean him off, and just like that, a 3 or a 2 for 1 instantly turned into a 3 for 1, plus a red buff invade from Dignitas. Everyone's not done just yet. Will face check, but the red buff is just about to respawn. He might still have a chance to work his way in there, but most likely not. Now with Cyno already heading his way towards those back harpies.
Things starting to look a bit grim for Space Station in the early game. Down nearly 5,000 gold, and we're only across the 10-minute threshold. That's brutal. 3,000 experience divides them as well. And take a look at where it is. QvoFred 2 levels up, and then Ataraxia 2 levels up. That is hard to recover from a Ravana and a Zhong who are off to a hot start.
It really is not fun either, trying to dance between the two of them, because Ataraxia is going to funnel off a lot of space with his ultimate alone with that Zhong, and QvoFred can kind of just give the full-on dive and chase that Dignitas need to fully prevent Space Station from trying to find that disengage. It's just leaving Space Station scattering in multiple directions, which is why Dignitas are able to kind of one by one take Space Station apart, just like what they were doing in Game 1.
even with all that solo farm. There's some trouble in left. Andinster's gone yet again. Hurriwind working together with Trixtank, and they clean up the Muzen Cobb easy. He's got to have a little more help in that situation. There's not much the Muzen Cobb can do alone there.
There's really also not much Jeff could do there, if you ask me, Finch, other than maybe be there a little bit sooner. But
Sure.
the fact that Hurriwind's able to just throw Calder at Andy, that was the real problem. He gets rooted in place. It's a ranged root.
It's
for
real
free.
good, isn't it?
And you can't really miss that one.
Nah, not at all.
Competitive level play, that's pretty good.
It's very good. And Skadi, the beneficiary of that change, certainly at this point. Transcendence, Ninja Tabi, looks like potentially going into something like a Crusher, maybe even Brawlers to back that up. So no lifesteal yet for Hurriwind. Both of these mid-hunters have been willing to forego that option for a little while longer.
I think I prefer the idea of a Brawlers more so than the Crusher, although both would be good here.
Sure.
I say Brawlers purely because of the fact there is a lot of self-sustain from Space Station, and he's got those hives. Cyno is Arachne, Aquarius, and BaRRa also opting for the lifesteal options with that Bancrofts, which, by the way, gotta add, interesting pickup choice. I mean, Olorun being relatively new to the competitive scene since he only recently came out, I think that he's pretty open as far as
Yes.
build pathways are concerned.
I agree. I don't think you necessarily build him as much mage ADC as you do with a lot of other ones, even though he does work very well in that regard. I don't think he's just relying on those ring items, as Cyno wants to gank on Ataraxia, but Ataraxia is level 14. They drop down the time dilation field as well to slow him down, but Cyno struggling in this trade so far. Now Trixtank is here with the hammer. Ataraxia survives long enough for them to win the fight.
BaRRaCCuDDa is still
He wants
trying
back
to
in.
create a little bit of space here, but he's looking for Ataraxia, and Ataraxia, the blink in, will prove to work against him as he trades out his life. But QvoFred, meanwhile, in the mid lane, manages to isolate andinster, and now another quick 3-for-1 special coming out of Dignitas. Fortunately enough for Space Station, there's no Primal Fury on the board for them to take just yet, but these gold and experience leads, Finch, just continue to climb.
Man, poor Ataraxia, he's not even against a physical hunter in lane and still gets the crit RNG, not working in his favor. Some trouble for JeffHindla underneath the tier 1 tower. He manages to get away, but they will, or tier 2, excuse me, but they'll lose the tier 1 for it in trade. Perhaps the reason why we see that Bancrofts early is the way that Olorun works, that once he gets past that 100 power, he starts to convert that into the crit chance. Bancrofts gets you over it immediately, so you have crit online right away. Maybe that's why he started rushing in and why he gets the crit.
Very viable option. And some quick math facts
Hey,
there
I got
with,
your back.
with your boy John Finch.
I'm trying.
I respect it, but Dignitas is not giving a whole lot of respect to Space Station on this map, that's for sure. Variety even making a debut all the way over from Solo Island. And that's simply because of the fact he's already taken Aquarius' tower, so now
Goodness
he's
gracious.
got that free range to roam here. It's so early on, Finch, and yet Dignitas just have full control of this map, it seems.
This is so different from game number 1, isn't it? Space Station did so much work staying close in the early game. I know it didn't go their way. There were a lot of good rotations from Dignitas that helped, but this time they're playing so much cleaner. And we said at the end of game 1, there was a lot of room for Dig to play cleaner, I think, despite winning game number 1. And so far, we've seen it for him here in game 2.
Kuvo has been clean with the Mystic Rushes.
Oh, yeah.
Every single one of them finding a home, and I mean, Anviladon, despite it not connecting, still usually led to kills.
That's
You don't
right.
need the damage, you just need it to close the gap.
Or the
because
stun, apparently, right? You just get closer, and all of a sudden it's
Well-
a Thor with a lightning hammer.
It turns out, because Odibo is a really good item, right?
It
so
is.
we nerfed it.
Right.
So then we gave it to Thor.
On his ult.
Yes.
And then all of his abilities that use the hammer after, they all hit it.
Extra, yes. Yeah,
And all
that's
good.
pretty good.
Well, Primal Fury is pretty good too, and Dignitas the ones that claim that objective. In response, there's 2 from Space Station and Right, but they have little kill potential against Variety. In fact, he might be the one with kill potential as he forces Aqua to dash away. And he's still not done with the chase. He's trying to see if he can get to force out this dazzling offensive.
Don't think Aquarius is going to give it up all that easily, though. Dignitas is going to have to work for that cooldown timer, but Dig doesn't really seem to mind, considering the fact that they just took that Primal Fury. It's kind of at their leisure where they want to go next. Cyno just trying to farm out whatever he can find, but Dig has just forced Space Station to split so much of the little bit of farm that they're leaving them with. It's just not giving Space Station a lot to recover with.
JeffHindla has been put into the...
He's level 9.
Yeah. I
Oh,
didn't get to
poor
talk.
Jeff.
Hurriwind gets the kill credit and right back onto the FG now, Taco. Cyno's way in the back line. I picked him as the thread last time. Let's see if it works out for me. He goes right to Hurriwind. Aegis is there. Gets a shell to keep him alive too. But Spacestation, they get the kill and the FG. Dignitas gamble forward and they end up losing it. There's the SSG boys finally getting something to break their way.
This is massive for Cyno. Can't believe that he somehow managed to find an auto or something to break his way through that Dignitas front line. But Dig have got to be kicking themselves for this one, Finch. It's not that it's going to automatically turn this game back into Space Station's favor, but the slowdown that this could potentially have might just be enough time for BaRRaCCuDDa to come online and andinster to potentially start impacting these team fights seriously.
Well, how much do you like Olorun's late game potential, Taco?
Love it.
It's not like with the Morrigan, or where do you put him?
It is insane.
There they were. You saw them, crits.
Ranked is not competitive, and
Sure.
I understand this, Finch. But BaRRaCCuDDa can do some pretty nasty things with the Olorun that I don't think is available to any other god in the game, and it's all coming down to the timing and usage of that sanctified field. One slip-up of Dignitas on a Phoenix Siege, even if these Fire Giants continue to be stolen by Space Station, I think that Dignitas could potentially wind up in a rather troublesome situation. And game one, even though Dig was going back and forth with Space Station, it still didn't feel like Space Station was really convincing us that they were going to win. I don't think that's the case here. You can't really afford to take chances with that Olorun and the tower push potential that Space Station have in their current draft.
I agree. Dignitas going to need to continue some of the clean play we saw from them earlier. If we can, let's go back and take a look at that Fire Giant steal because it was so close. I know Cyno was the one that was in there doing some damage. Let's see if he steals it. He does force Hurriwind into the Aegis early and then try and make his moves towards the actual FG. Drops down, maybe gets in a Golden Blade auto.
Golden Blade auto was actually enough to steal it. So the fact that 30-something damage at best is what stripped that one away. That is some rough stuff there for Dignitas for sure. But to be fair, Spino was up in the air in the little Spiderling status. You can't really touch the Arachne from the landing. It's just tough when you go for those early Fire Giant calls.
It is difficult. I mean, that's why we call them, 50-50 so often. I would give that one much closer to 70-30, 80-20, of course, but Cyno manages to worm his way in there and strip that one away. And as we were saying, I don't think that this means Space Station are going to start pushing or anything like that. It's a stopgap measure. This buys him a little bit more time to farm. Variety has been locked down, but I don't know how much trouble he's really in. Kingslayer's pretty good if he ends up having to use it, and he sends both of them on their way.
Variety seems like he wants more of that fight to keep going because he's got backup on the way. QvoFred and Trixtank know that they could definitely pick apart Cyno and Aquarius, but Space Station's solo and jungler not looking to take any further chances. This has been a really strong delay of game for Space Station. Tons of farm being able to be found here. Cyno, I mean, look at Jeff. He was level 9 a couple of minutes ago, and he's got that secondary relic online now and did opt for the Frenzy yet again. So it seems like Space Station still might be looking to take the initiative in some of these engagements.
Both teams relying a lot on Anihil, though, it seems. The upgraded Curse Donk there for Aqua, trying to mitigate some of this healing from Dig, and there is a good bit of it. Even Robin has some self-heal. Obviously the set, Zhong as well, Fafnir, so he'll cut into all of that. And then there's some on the other side, double Brawler's Beat Sticks from Dig.
I am still a little bit surprised, though, that Space Station just don't seem interested in trying to pick up a Shell to deal with Zhong. Shell is probably one of the most brutal relics for a Zhong to try and fight into.
This is a trap.
And Space Station just, they don't really seem to be all that concerned by it. They'd rather take the aggressive items and, well, Space Station also going to let Dignitas take that T2 tower for free in duo. Not everybody grouped up, though, just trying to give time for Cyno to collect a little bit more farm, it seems.
I am a bit surprised by the reliance on the Blink in particular, especially with some of the drafts they've been picking into. It doesn't feel like this comp is ready to follow up immediately on the back of a big Blink Mez from the Kumbhakarna. Now, maybe that changes with the Olorun. He's got some good follow-up as Cyno cannot win this trade, and I'm surprised he took it. He at least got the Tier 1 tower in right, and maybe can bait Variety to a bad spot as there is some backup coming, but Variety recognizes it and falls back. But yeah, the Blink is the one I think that surprises me a little bit, Tuck.
Cyno's still trying to get Variety to come a little bit closer here, but Variety's got to know something's up. You don't just see pro players choosing to cancel out their backs at 40% HP. But Variety's still pushing forward because now it's Dignitas who have actually made the rotation to solo, and it's largely due to the fact that that Fire Giant is just about to respawn, Finch.
They're ready for it, and they want this one to belong to them. Remember, the last one was actually stolen by Space Station Gaming, so Dignitas popped the frenzy, and this Fire Giant's all theirs. No one from Space Station is coming out to defend this at all.
And Cyno, while he was trying to initially bait Variety, it seemed like it actually works against him, because all that delay for him to actually back to base, now he won't have the same opportunity to try and steal that Fire Giant away. I think it was still worth the attempt to send Cyno or maybe even Jeff in there to see if they could try and steal it. Aquarius seems like too instrumental of a utility kit right now for setup for Space Station. I don't think they can afford to lose Aquarius before a team fight underneath these Phoenixes, but it's hard to say it's going to go much better now that Dignitas is full 5-man with that FG.
That's right. Runeforged hammer there for Cubo. We don't see that a lot. Let's see if it helps him out here in this next engagement for the Robin underneath the right side. Phoenix. They don't have Cyno here for this one. He is keeping the minion wave pushed up in mid. And maybe that's why Dignitas are falling back, as we do have a brief pause coming out. Hurriwind gonna need a moment to make sure everything's taken care of for Team Dignitas. But yeah, maybe we can take a moment to talk about that Runeforge I was just bringing up. I feel like we don't often see that item much anymore, but hey, maybe we can work here for Rob.
I love the item pickup here, though, for the Robin, because there is so much setup already in play for that Runeforge passive to really come into effect. Keep in mind, it's when targets are actually controlled by some form of crowd control that you start to get that benefit of, I believe, 10% additional damage for those CC targets. And when you have a free range root, I mean, that's something that Cubo could certainly love to work with.
That's right. Remember, we saw it on Artemis a lot towards the beginning of the year, and a bunch of hunters.
Well, her
really.
root isn't ranged.
Well, yeah.
You
Ranged
can't throw it
roots
at
are
people.
pretty darn good. Good point there, Taco. Glad you brought in some of that hot analysis for us. Again, we do have a brief pause happening here in the game right now, but this feels real different between games number 1 and game number 2 right now here, Taco, because Dignitas have been playing, for the most part, if we excuse that that Fire Giant fight, very clean here in this game. They got off to a huge early lead and have not let it go.
Yeah, it's not really a surprise that Dignitas are still in the driver's seat. I think that, unfortunately enough for Space Station, that initial pick onto JeffHindla kind of set the tone the pacing of the match from the get-go. Ataraxia just had such a massive advantage over BaRRaCCuDDa since he was the one who actually got that first blood credit, and it just continued to have a sort of trickle-down effect across the spread of the rest of the map. Also, when that initial solo site gank didn't really break out the way that Space Station were intending it to, and Dignitas were just so relentless on that blue buff pressure. They were trying to do everything in their power to create space for Ataraxia over there in duo to be left unattended, because without Cyno there to try and consistently pressure out the red buffs, since he was forced to rotate to blue, it's just so much time for Dignitas.
And Dignitas did a good job answering. Despite getting that early kill for Ataraxia on JeffHindla, it was Cyno who was the early aggressor, constantly in their jungle, looking for invades of his own. And they reset those cooldowns pretty quickly. They were able to reestablish control of their own jungle while getting the timer for the jungle of Space Station. That was pretty important to slow down a lot of that early momentum. And now Space Station are kind of left looking around. They've got JeffHindla on some of these aggressive relics, and he hasn't had a timing to use those. BaRRaCCuDDa's just trying to get caught up and farm on the Olorun, and he hasn't made it there yet. There's been a good deal of struggles so far for Space Station.
One thing I do really like, though, about Jeff with that blink on the Kumbhakarna that I hadn't really factored in before, it might just be to try and ult Ataraxia the second that he tries to invest for that Zhong ultimate. Once he goes to release his actual ghost sack, I think it'll be a lot more complicated if he's losing part of that ultimate in the air. But again, this is going to really rely on some strong coordination from Space Station. So I'm really curious to see how their execution actually plays out as a team overall. And this is where we can really start to see whether or not, I should say, that break between Phase 1, MSI, and Phase 2 now really panned out well for Space Station.
That's a great point. I mean, because that's the thing that felt like it was missing. We've been saying that all set long, too. It's that when they get into those really tough moments, you have to make a really tough decision quickly, and all 5 people be on the same page. It's felt like that's where Space Station has had some struggles. Because we do have a brief moment where we're working on the pause. Maybe we can go back and talk a little bit more about that Fire Giant steal that we saw happen there, Taco, because it looked like that was off Golden Blade.
And I would love to get a little bit more in depth on this one. It's not so much the way that the steal took place. We know that Cyno definitely took that with the Golden Blade, but the way that Dignitas were kind of corralled around the objective, it really felt like a slight lack of respect towards Space Station upon entryway there, but when you factor in just how much of a level gap there was between every single member on Dignitas and the likes of Space Station, I can kind of understand why Dignitas might get a little bit lackadaisical around that FG, but those are chances that you can't really afford to take against the caliber of some of these teams. I mean, Space Station is still a really experienced team, and with their veterancy, I just don't think that it's wise to try and take those 50-50 gambles.
Yeah, clearly it didn't quite work out for them that time. As we move back into the game, all the players appear to be taken care of. And as you said, this is where that coordination is going to be key. BaRRaCCuDDa's Sanctified Field is a game-changing type ultimate. Like, fear no evil. Like I'm a monster for Scylla. It's the type that if it's perfect, he can turn this around.
Yeah, picture Ataraxia getting knocked up into the air, right, from a good Jeff epic uppercut, and then you've got BaRRa's Sanctified Field waiting right at the bottom. That could be the trap play that Space Station are trying to set up here with this Kumbha on the blink.
If they can find it, and this is going to be where we find out. Variety has Cyno in the middle lane, so it's a 4v4 on the short lane on the right-hand side. Trixtank the furthest forward. Looks like Relic's up for everyone. No Frenzy, though, for Dig to help out. And they immediately throw Calder to the back to keep andinster busy. He's losing just to the dog. Had to use Aegis to stay alive. Trixtank is quite low, too. Did a bit too much tanking. But in the mid lane, they've got a good deal of work there. Variety's brought that Phoenix down pretty low.
Cyno's still trying to play defense on the mid side while Dignitas are trying to siege on the right. Jeff's going to barely wiggle his way out of there, surrounded by Trixari and Ataraxia. But Space Station, their health bars, sure, they're getting low. These Phoenixes, health's getting a little bit questionable there in mid, but right side still looking healthy and strong.
That's right. For a little while, Dig had 2 over there in mid to force Space Station back. This is the fight, though, the Variety wants to take. He wants Cyno in this 1v1, and now that he's forced back, there's a good chance he can move in for that mid Phoenix, but Variety's going to back and TP back in instead. Meanwhile, JeffHindla has been locked down the right-hand side of the Phoenix. They don't find much more there. Dignitas can continue this siege.
Still, Dignitas, they don't have waves. That's the true problem here. This is not an enhanced fire giant. There's no removal of that 50% for the backdoor protections, and without the creeps, Dignitas just can't get the relevant damage in.
They're all in on both. Variety's all in on the mid Phoenix, and on the right-hand side, Ataraxia all in on Andy. They have dropped down the Sanctified Field, and that will cost Ataraxia's life. It's 1-for-1, the Muzen Cobb for the Zhong, but they got the mid Phoenix. Dignitas likely very happy with that.
Cyno just couldn't hold it by his lonesome. Did the best that he possibly could have, though, with the position that he was in. It's just now Dignitas, they have the 4v4 advantage since that mid Phoenix has been removed, and there's going to be a steady stream of creep, so it's more like a 4v3 in all honesty, Finch.
Yes, this is definitely in their favor, and remember, they still have Hurriwind on the Skadi for damage onto these Phoenixes. BaRRaCCuDDa in trouble. Variety blinks right to the back line. Aegis over, and Variety gets the kill, no problem. Trixtank has transformed. That means right side Phoenix goes down. They've got the extra set of abilities, and JeffHindla has fallen as well. Dignitas, with 4 up against 2, might have a chance to close this out here.
Oh, this could be dangerous, though, for Dignitas if they're not careful. Aquarius, Cyno, and Andy still deal a decent amount of damage, but with this Fafnir stim, coerce effect might just be enough.
They initially looked for Cyno, but Cyno backed off, so they didn't have a pick opportunity. I think they may have just been trying to bait Space Station into overcommitting, but great patience there from SSG. I know they lose to the mid and right Phoenix, but that could have been even worse. They're still in the game for now.
Andinster still having a Stinger available just made it unlikely for Dignitas to want to keep trying to push in, especially after Aquarius invested for that dazzling offensive. It's just too risky trying to properly juggle Titan aggro as well as tanking up a little bit of free cast damage out of Cyno and Andy. It's just not worth the risk, especially when Dignitas have such an obvious lead. I mean, they're fully in control right now. They don't need to do anything to risk that.
So Dignitas fall back, collecting their spoils, which is to the tune of a 20,000 gold lead. Only 25 minutes here into the game, 15,000 experience to go along with it ain't bad at all. Dig should be able to regroup here in the next 10 seconds around this fire giant. Still not enhanced, but plenty good all the same. Even rounding these builds out, things are starting to look real bad for Space Station.
But look at the preventative measures that Dignitas are taking, even in their builds. Hurriwind with the Midgardian mail on the Skadi. And I love this pickup option for Dig's mid laner because it's going to prevent Cyno from having that isolation pick opportunity. I mean, the whole purpose of Arachne is to get in there, spam your autos, and usually kill whoever you're targeting before they have a chance to respond, but that's not going to be the case. That mid-guardian is just going to slow him down in the process, and a shifter shield to boot immediately after the fact. This is one tanky Skadi, and all of the emphasis here is on Calder. And the way that Hurriwind has been throwing out Calder at BaRRa, at Andy, it's more so just serving as a route for Dignitas to collapse around.
This move from Spacestation might not have worked. They tried to see if they can grab the tier 2 while Dignitas are busy on the right-hand side, but they couldn't do it cleanly enough, and so they end up losing Andinster. Now Aqua in some trouble. He does get the dash off, still has the Dazzling Offensive, which he's now been forced into using, but overhead kick immunes the stun. The damage there from Variety, and all of a sudden it's a 5v3 in Dig's favor.
Finch, that might have just been the end of Spacestation with those 2 picks. Andy and Aquarius have both been key elements for keeping Spacestation alive underneath his Phoenix Sieges, but with all 3 Firebirds going down, Dignitas just have so much time to actually try and bring down this Titan.
It's such a difficult position to win from. 3 Phoenixes down, but that's the task for Spacestation Gaming. They lose Cyno. He's no longer a part of it. Frenzy has now been popped by Dignitas. They force Spacestation back into their fountain. Even with the time dilation field, Ataraxia finds a double. BaRRaCCuDDa goes down, and Dig grab game number 2.
It was just too much pressure the whole way through there. And in game 1, starting to look a little bit more like Dignitas, maybe just shaking off some of that rust from in between MSI and Phase 2. Very clean gameplay throughout the entire match.
Yes, Dignitas looking better, and for what it's worth, Spacestation looking a little bit more lost than what we saw in game number 1. And they were able to hold on a little bit longer, and maybe one miscalculation around the Fire Giant really hurt them. But in this game, it was all Dignitas from the beginning. Questions abound for me about that first death that JeffHindla took, I mean, about some of the choices they were making and where they spent their time. Taco, this was rough for them.
It's definitely been pretty rough for the guys over there on Spacestation, but I'm still not going to count them out just yet. I think that after what we saw in game 1, I'm willing to bet that Spacestation are going to give us a really strong game 3.
You're right, they still have at least one more shot. So we're going to take a quick break here, and we'll be right back, talk a little bit more about the SPL.
INAP, powering the control room for the SMITE Pro League.
And we are back like those dinosaurs. I'm Tom. I'm not Ryan, but I'm still going to tell you about some Zeus stuff. We got Chapter 3 of the fantastic stuff going on here as far as what's going on in your SMITE client. Pick up your Chibi Zeus skin or your Spirit Sun Ho Yi skin. I know somebody that has a fantastic Ho Yi impression, and he's sitting right next to me. Totally. Let's hear it.
It's definitely not me. I think you're only talking about yourself. I was wondering how you were going to transition going from Ryan to Zeus, and then you brought out the Chibi Zeus. That was really clever. I'll give you that one.
Can you do the Ho Yi
No,
impression?
I'm not going to do any of that for you. No.
Well, then
No.
I guess we'll just have to take a look at the numbers. Game number 2 goes in the direction of Team Dignitas. Game number 1, a rather tight set. Game number 2, I think Spacestation are tight after how this one went. 3, 6, and 2 for Cyno. Does have something fancy. He gets a Fire Giant steal, but unfortunately, it's one of those Fire Giant steals that does not matter because everyone winds up dying after the fact. just as simple as it can be. Totally big numbers on the side of Dignitas and little numbers on the side of Space Station.
And it was also how the game started with the first blood. Dignitas really recognizing the pathing from JeffHindla on the first blood. They punish him. Ataraxia gets the first blood. And then on top of this, Ataraxia punishing out BaRRaCCuDDa in that dueling to the point where he needed to get ganked a couple of times. There was one time when Cyno rotated over, tries to go for the 2v1. Ataraxia lives long enough to get saved by Trixtanks on the Fafnir shell, and this is that replay that he survives the 1v2.
Yeah, this is pretty insane. Raxia here, he goes ahead and pops the ultimate to get some extra protections, makes use of his beads, stuns somebody out, avoids the knockup damage, and then waits for his teammates to show up, turns around, and gets the kill.
And then blinks in to get another assist, or rather a kill actually onto BaRRaCCuDDa.
Huge.
With the assistance of Hurriwind as well. And Hurriwind, speaking of which, using the Skadi dog, the Caldeer, to throw it onto BaRRaCCuDDa during this Phoenix Siege, really showing that no one is safe in their backline when Skadi's on the field.
That's the big deal, is that Skadi now penetrates the front line. Before, it used to be able to kind of stop her or body block her, just stand in the way. Now she's got a mechanism to toss something to that back line and make use of it. And Ataraxia goes ahead on his Zhong and looks good. Right here, this was classic Dignitas. Ataraxia and Hurriwind absolutely did their job. Trixtank facilitated, but I'm staring at Variety, and I'm staring at QvoFred. These are the heavy hitters on Team Dignitas, and what Variety was able to do here, 26,000 player damage, his direct lane opponent. We always talk about that fake solo lane damage. Aquarius had 10,000, so that's an absurd amount of damage. I mean, Variety, do you think he's going to keep it going into game number 3?
I think he could, because the way the picks and bans worked out in game number 2 was the first 2 picks from Dignitas was their opposite side lanes. It was Ataraxia, Zhong, it was Variety set. It looks like that's the foundation for Dignitas, even though the way they play in-game is not from their first 2 picks. They heavily rely on Trixtank, QvoFred, and Hurriwind to set the pacing of the game.
It's a great look here for Team Dignitas. Up 2-0. This, of course, being a best of 5. This is match point for Team Dignitas. It's up to Space Station Gaming to stretch this one out. In order to do so, they're going to ban out a couple of the characters that are powerful in the jungle, the Arlong Shen and the Thor Man, and then, of course, the Bee God. This is just an incredible amount of push. If you're banning a Muzen Cobb, that means you don't want to select it. So that means I want to see something from SSG with a bit more control, because AMC feels like everything except for the control.
They might adapt to what Dignitas have been doing and just strip away the Zhong, honestly. I think Ataraxia has shown he's very comfortable on a non-hunter. It's funny because both BaRRa and Ataraxia really love Jingwei, but they're not going to go for it so far in this set.
It's no longer about being safe. When we first saw this kind of advancement of the solo lane, long lane, right? Because we're in a very interesting part of the meta where I think right now everything's kind of changing. Players are understanding the game at a deeper level, and we're seeing some crazy stuff. The long lane is now the solo lane, and when we first saw that, totally, it was an attempt to be safe. Pick Jingwei and hide on your Now people are realizing, well, I'm 5 levels above everybody else, like I'm Xayah in Season 2, so let's look at these hard carries, and we're getting these mages.
So here's the thing, Zhong is also safe in just a different way, and to the point where the reason why Ataraxia survived that 1v2 gank was his build. Pythax, Peace, and Gem of Isolation, the health that he gets from that, using the Exorcism for the heal, the protections that he gets from his passive. Dignitas, recognizing that might have been the strategy for Space Station, opt to ban it away themselves.
So the characters that we see there are still safe. The Zhong, the Nuwa comes to mind, right? You see the set, but they're certainly more aggressive, and I think it's that players are looking for that perfect storm, and Zhong certainly could be it. And because of that, Dignitas banned it away. Space Station with the first overall selection go with Anhur, King of the Jungle, because he's a lion, but you play him in lane, get it? Set and Skadi across the way.
I see what you did there, but when there's a line or a cat, it's got to be a dog on the other side, right? And that's where Caldeer is going to fill that role. Probably going to go into the mid lane again for Hurriwind. Shown a lot of comfort, I would say, on that hunter. It's not like a hunter that you could just casually play, I think, in the mid lane compared to, like, let's say, a Neith, an Anhur, the Chiron, potentially, the Muzen Cobbs. It's a little bit of a different style. You have to really understand the mechanics of that third ability, Ice Ring.
I think for a lot of Hurrwind's career, there were other things to talk about with respect to what he brings to the table, but something that has always been his sort of claim to fame is his god pool. He's had a really wide, give him Apollo mid and he'll win you some games. He's played the Skadi in the mid lane. Obviously, this is a newer look with some of the changes, but comfortable with the rest of the kit that hasn't changed. Absolutely, for sure. And if you want proof, don't listen to me. Go watch the VOD from last game. Homie was killing it. Great stuff out of the Cold Huntress. Space Station, though, they select the Morrigan and Athena. I love these picks. Very briefly, Tully, I'll tell you why. The Morrigan, we saw BaRRaCCuDDa look really fantastic in game number 1. And Athena, JeffHindla, I mean, that's peanut butter and jelly, man.
Sure, he's just going to be able to play setups, hit his dubs, hit his trips, whatever he's going to call on the comms after the taunt. But Morrigan, for BaRRaCCuDDa probably, as we're going to see andinster on the Anhur, doesn't have the Zhong to transform into, so Dignitas have to think about how can they limit the true value of the Changeling ultimate from BaRRa, maybe not get him such high caliber late game threats.
Anhur is going to be most successful in the mid game. The Morrigan is going to be successful late game. Athena kind of helps out. Again, we see the Khepri, and again, I'm going to revisit the conversation about executes. Should Cyno look to pray? Understanding that one of the reasons I keep bringing it up more so than usual is because not only does the execute interact well with Khepri, but Cyno has a good Thanatos, Achilles, Ao Kuang. So do you expect SSG to go in that direction?
I would hope that they do, because
you want to see this.
It's not even just the one execute. It's that they got the Morrigan to do a second execute even potentially if the first one doesn't prove to be fruitful. So why not go for it, right? You need this early pressure. Morrigan is going to start to come online mid to late game. Athena's about team fighting. Anhur's going to control that early to mid game. If you can get a good jungler early game, like an Achilles or Thanatos, Ao Kuang is more late game, paired up with the Anhur for andinster, you got to get those two players comfortable. Cyno and andinster are momentum players.
And don't forget, this man right here, Aquarius, also has a strong Thanatos. When we talk about Thanatos solo, it's a little bit weird, but the two guys that are going to bring it out are here on the battlefield. It's variety and it's Aquaman.
That's true. You never know what's going to be rolling down in that solo lane between the two. I think the Anhur or the Arthur versus Osiris matchup was very cookie cutter and vanilla in that first game. Don't expect to see that again throughout this set.
I loved, by the way, the solo set. We've seen solo set now twice in competitive play. Once earlier in the week when we saw it in the minor league, if I'm not mistaken. We've seen it played in the long lane when Snoopy came out and won his 1v1s there in the carry role. But the solo set, I think, is, and of course, plenty of jungle. Set has a number of just base damage things. His ultimate just gives you numbers, kind of like spot weakness. I'm all about it. Build tanky. See what happens. Control. Dignitas thinking about the Paolau, and they'll look for all out in. And Robin, this is just a character that deals with everything well.
I like the way Kuvo played the Ravana that last game. He had a lot of damage. He had a lot of good plays. He ended up that game 7-1-9 on this Ravana. I'm thinking back to one play where he actually used his ultimate through the blue buff just to kill Cyno under that tier 1 solo tower, like level 6 or 7. He's like, I'm dropping in, boys. Follow up.
Chef's kiss to the Achilles right here. Batzinator going to provide a ton of control. Team fights is what Space Station Gaming are looking for. That said, Dignitas have the time bomb. They go at the hell in the last selection. You gotta love what Dignitas have been doing. 3 seemingly different strategies in 3 different games.
A lot of defensive mindsets coming through from these teams, but Dignitas thinking about ways to get out of that execute threshold. Hell with the heal is going to be the main focus for it.
Going to be a nice look there. Hell not only with the heal to avoid some of the executes, but the cleanse, baby. That's what I'm looking at almost every time. A strong Hell is going to have power to build to enable the damage and the healing, but a stronger Hell will be able to utilize those cleanses. Fear no evil. Okay, it's a couple of players, but Pillar and Pale, if Hell's around, you're good, man.
Now the question is this going to be Hell for Ataraxia, or is this going to be Hell for Hurriwind?
It's going to be Hell for Space Station Gaming trying to deal with it. That's what it's going to be.
Yes.
But realistically, I do think this is one of the situations where we see the Skadi, even though Hurriwind played it very well last game, go into the hands of Ataraxia, because Hurry's Hell is really, really strong.
It really is. And against, I believe, BaRRaCCuDDa's Morrigan, I think I would rather put a Skadi there.
Well, we'll certainly see it. Finger guns out for Space Station Gaming, and the teeth are bared for Team Dignitas. Do they take the set? We'll find out with Finch and Taco.
Well, if you ban the Zhong away, and you need another mage to come into your team and do well for you, hell doesn't feel too bad, right, Taco? I mean, that's what Dignitas are saying as they add that to the comp that worked so well last game.
Still has a decent amount of AoE presence, that's for sure, Finch. Very similar to Zhong in that respect, except now she's also got a cleanse. And oh, by the way, can't forget about that team sustain, especially when you combine it into the self-healing that Variety is already going to have. This could be tough and possibly even open up even more aggressive options here between this set and Robin.
It certainly can. It's going to make anti-heal that much more important by Space Station, and there's no time like the present. As soon as they're able to, it's going to feel pretty good to build. BaRRaCCuDDa back on the Morrigan that looked good for him in game number 1, but you heard Totally say on the desk, he doesn't have the Zhong to transform into this time. That helped him so much in that first game.
But he could become Skadi,
who's real good.
Who is
Did we talk about the ranged route yet?
Yeah, that's I feel like every single time I say it out loud, I have to remind myself that it's an actual ability right now for Skadi.
Yeah,
but
good.
There is a ranged route that BaRRaCCuDDa could possibly look to utilize here. This is going to be, I think, a little bit more tough as far as the matchup is concerned, though, for Barra. His positioning is going to be even more important than every other game that's taken place so far, because one misstep could very likely be the end of him.
It certainly could, so we'll have to see him play even more cautiously this time, as it is Ataraxia on the Skadi in the long lane. And andinster, who's under trouble, but a good taunt from Jeff. I don't think the abduct would have landed either way, but JeffHindla right there to make sure Andy's okay.
That was beautiful from Jeff. Didn't even want to take the chance of Andy dying there, and
absolutely not.
Well, for good reason. It's bad enough that andinster already had to lose those purification beads relatively early on. I'm sure QvoFred's probably going to be looking to revisit this mid lane before he even hits level 5. He's just going to try and take advantage of that cooldown timer for Randy's relic.
Hurriwind still going without a blessing. Remember last time he rushed Transcendence on the Skadi mid, this time with Hell. He's already at Book 2. I assume waiting to complete the Book of Thoth. To start getting stacking right away. It's just a ton of power if you're able to get away with it, man. And mana too, all the stuff that Hell wants.
Well, right now, BaRRaCCuDDa doesn't want us to see Trixtank in his lane. Trixtank holding on to that abduct to the last second. Knew that Barra would try to escape, but it's already a first blood here taking place in duo, and that's Ataraxia who's collecting the prize.
Yeah, that is brutal for Space Station yet again. I mean, these good starts for Dig in the long lane have hurt them, but QvoFred might give them an answer back. That's the slow coming through from Cyno into the taunt, and it's just not enough. QvoFred falls, andinster answers back.
Love that commitment, though, from Space Station. They knew that their hunter was toast, so why not go all in mid, where Qvo's very likely not going to have the backup that he needs with Trixtank over in duo.
Variety might be in some trouble in duo as well as Cyno comes over for damage, but they don't want to push the issue, and Variety should be A-okay. So that's big to slow down this jungler for QvoFred that worked so well last game. The Robin was like 7-1 and 8 or something like that at one point in the game. That is huge. It's just that Ataraxia has had a great set so far. You don't want him fed.
There's just so many different methods, though, that Dignitas could use to pretty much initiate a team fight. They've got Variety with these sand clones to kind of close the gap and then go towards that Kingslayer. That's usually going to be enough to force separation, as is between the members of Space Station. But Qvo, with all of his die capability, and the Khepri is what I'm really looking towards. Trixtank had a phenomenal game one with this Khepri.
Right.
Numerous saves that took place for Dignitas on their carries because of that Scarab's Blessing. And I'm thinking the only real counteractive measure that Space Station have for this is Cyno with the Fear No Evil.
He's going to have to do something to keep Trixtank and one more member CC'd at minimum in these team fights. That way they can take their target down before the res can come through. Not an easy task, but Cyno, one of our winners from Worlds most recently as part of the Splice roster, we know is capable of making plays like that. We'll just have to see if he can bring them out here in this set when Space Station need it.
Hey, double Fear No Evil is pretty good, though.
Oh,
that
put
is
some of that
something
pressure
that
on
I don't want to count it out for Space Station. I think that it is possible for them to have turn and burn scenarios go their way. But this is a relatively low pressure comp from the start. I think that we've already witnessed a little bit of that as is with the way that Dignitas has been kind of pushing into Space Station's jungle. Even that early gank onto BaRRaCCuDDa over there at level 3. So it just goes to show that really no one is safe right now, and no one can really consider their farm to be guaranteed either.
A little bit more action here in the middle lane. QvoFred going back to hit the speed buff, so maybe Dig won't look for any aggression here. Instead, they'll fall back. Variety has made this set look strong so far here throughout this set. God, I won't get tired of that joke, I suppose, at this point. So I'm expecting for his rotations to be impactful for this team yet again. As you're sort of highlighting, it can feel like it's so difficult to get away from a set when the rest of the team is already team fighting quite well. He likes to get lost in the shuffle and pick off those targets.
Something else I want to point out is, despite BaRRaCCuDDa having been the first blood, he's still got well, he stayed even with Ataraxia and experience, but he's actually got a slight edge right now over the Skadi, and I'm thinking that that's partially because of the fact that Trixtank split a little bit of farm. Even if it's one wave can make a difference between some of these numbers.
Trixtank showing his presence here in the middle lane, taunting back in. Is able to make it out of there. Hurriwind has the cleanse on this Hell. And that's just a bit of a preview of what Hell's going to be like for the remainder of this game. Tough to deal with.
The amateur move from Jeff, honestly. Everybody knows that you dash first on Athena, then use your shield wall,
exactly,
then use your taunt.
I mean, if you can get an ult in there, you might even do that first before the taunt.
Yeah.
Taunt should be last. The last thing that you do. You really don't even want a taunt if you can hold it. Save it for next game.
It's just, you just really want to make sure you're using that dash first and foremost. Because if you don't use your escape to get close enough to them to then 3 and then 2, it's never going to work out well for you on the Athena. You need that shield wall before the taunt goes down.
I'm pretty sure that taunt doesn't activate. Like, you're not allowed to cast it until you dash. You know what I mean? Like, you can't.
At the very minimum, yes.
You can't.
If shield wall's on cooldown because you made the mistake of using it somewhere else before the dash, I don't know why you would ever do that, but we're just explaining things to the public.
Yeah, we're just letting y'all know that you should just do this taunt more often. It's pretty good of an ability there for the Athena. Of course, we could trust JeffHindla to be able to do exactly that here for them in this game. A bit of a slower start compared to what we've seen in games 1 and 2.
What about the one person that feels personally attacked right now?
He should, or she, whomever it is, should feel personally attacked. It's directed at them. Taunt more and dash later. I don't know. You know this.
Unfortunately, some of the people in our ranked games still do not. But hey, this is competitive after all, and well, Dig and Space Station, it's been kind of slow in comparison to games 1 and 2 here.
Yeah, it has been for sure. And that's because this is the decider match, right? Well, in a way, it certainly is if Space Station lose. Dignitas close this one out with 1 win. Space Station would love to be able to get started on a nice comeback here with 3 in a row of their own. But this is that first step, so everyone being a little bit more measured, everyone taking this one a bit more as it comes. So some of the force that we've seen earlier as JeffHindla forces the cleanse from Hurry yet again.
But it's just so tough trying to set Andinster up for that pillar stun. Trixtank, though, not going to make it away just in time for the abduct, though. Closes out from that Fear No Evil. Good Desert Fury damage from Andinster with the impale from Kuvo into the wall. But that's a full-on disengage now for Space Station. And Dig don't really even seem all that bothered by it. This healing from Hurriwind, so detrimental right now because Space Station just don't have the same leisure.
Link traded for Shell, I believe, in that engagement, so I don't know if anyone particularly feels like they won in that engagement. Andinster has been doing really well, though, with these impales to create some space, to find the stuns, and get his team out of there. You're going to need perfect impales at a high level, I feel like, if you really want to make this Anhur work, and Andy's shown it so far.
Something I do find a little bit odd, though, is seeing Cyno with the Ninja Tabi on the Batz as opposed to a Warrior Tabi or even the Talaria. But, well, that thought we'll get back to it later. Because Jeff right now finding a nice double taunt onto Trix and Hurry without Cyno with the anti-heal. Hurry was just going to shrug it off.
I am also a bit surprised that we're seeing Ninja Tabi. The boots did see some changes coming in Ninja Tabi. I believe it has more attack speed now, whereas Warrior, or not Warrior Tabi, but Talaria lost some of its power. So it certainly makes some sense that there's some shifting in what boots we see, but a bit surprising is the attack speed on Batz as Hurriwind in trouble in the middle lane. Taunt in a Desert Fury is still not enough. Hurry makes it out.
Just not enough damage. Until Andy finishes off that Transcendence, this Anhur is probably going to be hurting for trying to deal enough to actually bring this hell down successfully. But the other thing about Ninja Tabi that strikes me kind of odd in comparison to the Warrior Tabi, I figure if you're going to go for the Brawler's Beat Stick, you want that pen item, why not back it up with more power? Why take the risk for the in-hands when you're having to trade out? If Cyno has to stay closer in the engagement, trying to find the autos to solidify a kill, I feel like that's already working against Space Station.
It is certainly already a tough path that they've walked down, but obviously some obvious synergy with the bots, and you can weave in those autos between the abilities. So perhaps Cyno playing towards that a bit, and trusting he's going to have to sell Hurriwind if he wants a kill. Aqua has the Fatal Strike forced out in the short lane on the right-hand side. That's Variety bullying him a little bit. It's now Dig on the red buff.
It's all been a bait here because Cyno's making his return back over to solo. Variety, though, going to be able to create enough of a gap with the Sand Clone teleportation feature, and
that means gold for Dignitas. They're going to move right on over to this in response to the heavy presence in solo lane. Variety, Sand Clone replacement jutsus his way out of there, and all of a sudden it's Dignitas with a gold fury. But Space Station responds with a Pyromancer. This is the best answer in that spot.
Space Station knew they wouldn't have time to actually try and work their way in for a contestation of that Gold Fury, so it's better to cut their losses short and just take the next best thing on the map. Pyromancer means that no more globals are available for either side, so it's going to come down to just the nitty-gritty of the jungle fight.
That's right, those big neutral objectives are now all been taken for the time being. So maybe we'll see the action slow down for a bit as we return to farming. And speaking of, they're farming for these items. So far, nothing particularly wild. The Gauntlet of Thebes was buffed a little bit as well coming into the mid-season update, so no surprise those are being prioritized as Aqua still struggling to trade out here up against Variety.
Variety just has that range in comparison to the Achilles, but Cyno hovering this solo side of the map means that Quvo is also going to have to respond in like fashion. But Variety is mostly just trying to prevent Aquarius from picking up his buff and getting out. Going to be able to juke out the stun for a second here. Opts for the Kingslayer, it seems like. No, just the Sandstorm.
Well, there will be ultimate usage here in the middle lane, and Andinster commits the Desert Fury. He's been real liberal with that ultimate here in the middle lane, and I like it. They're looking for aggression, but it's Cyno that they've made the target. QvoFred backed up. They might have actually had an opportunity off that abduct. I just don't think he realized. Instead, Dignitas will be looking for the disengage, but Ataraxia is rotating to the fight. So is BaRRaCCuDDa. We're going to have an actual throwdown here in the middle lane. Calder enters the fray. Ataraxia finds the first kill onto Andinster. That sends Space Station back. JeffHindla can't escape either. QvoFred finds one of his own.
But look at the sustain now from Dignitas. It's just a 5-man wrecking ball barreling down this mid lane here, Finch. Cyno and Aquarius are in position to try and delay, but Dignitas, they're still not taking enough damage.
It's actually a pretty sick Fear No Evil. Hits all 5 members, sets up for a double for Aquarius on the back end. He'll pay for it with his life, but that's all set up by Cyno, finding the placement. Ataraxia needs some backup, and he gets it. He takes down Cyno. This has been an extended bloodbath, and BaRRaCCuDDa wants to get his name in here too.
BaRRa had to have known, though, the risk that he was taking. We're looking for that final pick onto Ataraxia. Variety and Quvo still trying to close this one out, but could get turned on them. Instead, Andy's going to jump forward. Impale damage is solid, but not enough to kill Variety or Quvo.
Not without a basic attack on the back end of that. I love the way BaRRaCCuDDa played that fight, knowing he had a little bit of backup coming via Andy, and manages to worm his way out of there. A fight that could have been way, way worse for Space Station is turned around. And it all starts with Cyno finding the Fear No Evil placement.
For me, it wasn't really the Fear No Evil so much as it was Aquarius having upgraded that Cursed Ankh so early on. I mean, we're not even at the 15-minute mark yet, which is normally when players start to hit level 12, you'll see the Relic bot, but not upgraded right away. So this Cursed Ankh definitely sent a message, if you ask me, to Dignitas Finch, because that did not look like it was initially going to be enough damage up front, and the next thing you know, Aquarius is just two-piecing multiple members of Dignitas because of that Cursed Ankh, and Hurriwind being taken out of the fight so early on just made it really difficult for Ataraxia, Variety, Quvo to continue having free reign.
Yeah, any fight Aqua can rotate into and find a double, you're going to feel pretty good about for Space Station. They're certainly still down, not quite 3,000 gold, but close, as beads are forced out from Ataraxia in the long lane. But Space Station showing some signs of life here in a game they have to win if they want to keep this set going.
This was a big back and buy though for BaRRa. Has that Boombas online now, so all that additional movement speed is going to be critical for trying to steadily poke out Ataraxia while simultaneously avoiding that ranged route that Ataraxia could toss his way. And I think that that's why we also see an early rush of that shifter shield there for Ataraxia too. It gives him a little bit of magical protections, but more importantly is going to help him out whenever he is in the direct 1v1 boxing.
That's right, it's kind of dummy power too on the top end, and then, as you said, went under duress. It does as the name implies and shifts to a more defensive item, so not a bad pickup for him at all. He's not the only one that's making some interesting choices though. Some brawlers already grabbed early on to try and stop obviously the hell on the side of Dig, but some of the innate healing that comes out from Space Station Gaming, they're doing what they can to try and keep that sustain in line.
I think I'd like to see a Toxic Blade from andinster at some point in this match, though, whether it's his 4th item pickup choice or even the 5th, but sooner the better for sure. I'm not sold that alone brawlers and the Cursed Ankh from Aquarius is going to be enough as this match progresses, because Dignitas are going to eventually start just baiting out Aquarius' Cursed Ankh, and the second that relic goes on cooldown, Dignitas will just take over.
andinster is working on Pen now, so it might even be a Brawlers. He moves into his Ataraxia, has the beads forced out early on. No, that was the cleanse Hurriwind, as the Primal Fury stays leashed the entire time. They secure the objective, but Space Station are all in committed for the fight on the back end. But QvoFred and Ataraxia have something better to say. That's 2 picks already. andinster in trouble as QvoFred blinks on them. That's 1 more. They get the objective, and they're running away with the fight.
Setting the Kingslayer is so hard to stop. Meanwhile, we've got JeffHindla just getting surrounded and pounded by all of Dignitas. Variety still controlling Aquarius enough to the point where he's stuck underneath his T2 tower, and Dignitas, they're just going to utilize some of this health sustain to back off, heal, and look towards that Fire Giant.
They are going to go for the big-time objective here. No Pyromancers, no second-place silver medals for Dignitas. They want the big one, and they should be able to get it. I mean, no way Aqua can make his way in. There's no one who can contest. Great recognition from Dignitas. That's Primal. That's 4 kills for 0, and the Fire Giant. That's a huge swing in the game that wasn't too far out of reach for Space Station, but all at once, Dignitas might have just done it.
It was within a hand's reach, Finch. That was the initial gap between these two teams, but now Dignitas have just completely sunk Space Station's head underwater and are trying to keep him there. I don't want to say that it's over just yet, however. We've seen Space Station come out with some pretty incredible defenses throughout this set, Finch. So I definitely still think that there's turnaround possibility, especially since I mostly can't rule out the threat of a double Fear No Evil. We haven't really seen Space Station have a clean engagement with the Fear No Evils, but it's gonna make it difficult for Dignitas to want to try and outright siege, because the threat of that being a possible cooldown that Dignitas has to try and dance between should be enough.
Those are beads from QvoFred to keep the chase onto Cyno. He gets Fear No Evil out from him, as well as the Defender of Olympus coming out from JeffHindla. So that's 2 members that are not here, while all these towers are being sieged by the rest of Dignitas. Left side, take tier 1, comes down to tier 2 and mid falls as well. But Taco, you said something in there in your monologue that I liked, which is that Space Station hadn't had a clean engagement with the bots. I don't think they've had one all set, for what it's worth. Like, a chance to just start a fight on their own terms. I just don't think they've had it.
You can tell they've tried. They've tried to force it, but Dignitas have just already beat them to the punch. That's the problem for me. As Aquarius now trying to start the fight yet again, but Ataraxia is just dominating andinster.
And Cyno's going for this long loop around to the back of the fight, but he's not even going to make it here in time, it would seem. Instead, he's going to go clear the minion wave. Meanwhile, the left side Phoenix has just been taken. They need Cyno in this fight.
But Cyno's nowhere to be found. Aquarius gonna have the Fatal Strike into the fountain just to try and stay alive here. Meanwhile, Dignitas is working on the right side. Phoenix, QvoFred alone, seeming like he's gonna be enough to get the job done.
He does eventually have to back off as Cyno shows his presence there. Looks for the Sacred Monkey toss, but I don't know, man. That last engagement leaves a lot to be desired from Space Station. That's left and right Phoenix already down. And they never even had a defense, Taco. I mean, that's brutal.
That was just all over the place
Yeah.
from Space Station. I understand it on paper, what Cyno was trying to do there. Realizes that he fumbled the opportunity to come from behind with the Fear No Evil, tries to clear out the minion wave, but you can't leave Dignitas alone. They've got Calder to tank up these Phoenixes.
Yeah, it's been a little bit too much. They've given up here in these last 2 engagements. Now they have to desperately try and cling to their last Phoenix. It's Cyno in trouble already. He's been forced back all the way to the Titan room. Mid-Phoenix still healthy, but they've just landed a pluck, and Aqua's in trouble. Ataraxia is the one that pins him down and finds one more kill. Mid-Phoenix still not even the target as Cyno gets a nice Fear No Evil to cut the fight in half. It just doesn't seem like enough. BaRRaCCuDDa gets hurried, but pays forward with his life. Variety finds andinster way on the back line, and just like that, Dig ready to start barreling down the middle lane.
Dignitas just dismantling Space Station piece by piece here.
Sure.
All 3 Phoenixes down, a lone Cyno to try and play defense, but it's already too late, Finch, and Dignitas clean up match 3 in a pretty convincing fashion.
Yeah, that was dominance from Dignitas here. 3-0 over Space Station Gaming. And what should get you all excited if you're fans of the black and yellow out there is they got better each game. You can literally see it in the game times, right? A 40-minute slugfest that's a bit sloppy. Then in game number 2, they clean it up in about 26, 27 minutes. And then in game 3, they just take it from Space Station, 20 minutes.
Yeah, but it's kind of the opposite end if you're Space Station. I mean, they
That's a good
started
point.
off hot and just kept cooling down as this set progressed. It just seemed like they were getting more and more into their own headspace, I feel, Finch. So a little bit of confusion clearly read there, but I think that there were some promising components throughout this set that Space Station can look back on and feel pretty good about. That game 1 specifically was really convincing there from Space Station. I honestly thought for a second that they were going to take that one away from Dignitas. It just got a little bit too muddled towards the later phases, but I think all in all, Space Station shouldn't beat themselves up too hard about this one. That Game 3 performance, maybe a little bit so, but Games 1 and 2, I think that it's evident that Space Station have definitely made some improvements since Phase 1.
I agree. That was definitely tough there aside of Space Station. A couple plays stick out in my mind. The Aqua Tier 2 dive in Game 1, that was out of nowhere. Cyno not being there to defend the Phoenixes. Maybe there is a little bit of stuff they got to take care of. Either way, we'll be back talking a little bit more SPL after this break.
SteelSeries, the official peripheral provider of the SMITE Pro League.
Usually when you dig, you go down, but Team Dignitas all the way up, baby. Fantastic work here. 3 games in and 3 games down. But look at this. We got skins. Power Up Hera now available in the Sweet Victory Battle Pass. And what a sweet victory it was for Team Dignitas. Game number 1, a little bit back and forth, Anatoly. But as we saw game number 2 and 3, it just seemed to get easier.
They just digged and shaved a bunch of time off of the clock, going from 40 minutes in game 1 to 30 in game 2 to 20 in Game 3. An impressive performance from Dignitas. A lot of it was just objective control at the end of the day. It just never felt as though Spacestation were prepared for what Dignitas were bringing.
That's really I mean, that's the key of SMITE. I've been saying it since 2013, the stuff after the stuff. Look for those objectives. And it seems like the only objective that Space Station Gaming really got was that Fire Giant that came off of a Golden Blade proc, which is as close to luck as I could call it.
That was probably the most impressive Fire Giant steal outside of the Loki steal that Loki decoy steal that Lassus did that one time.
So as we take a look at these numbers, sure, you got QvoFred here, 4-1-7, 9-1-4 for Ataraxia, but this is one of those games where we can go even deeper. The numbers don't always tell the whole story. Totally, I think you picked out one of the plays that you wanted to show us and show kind of one of the bigger moments here in game number 3.
So this was when I was mentioning the Gold Fury control. If we're just going to pause it after the Athena dash right there, Jeff is just basically all alone right here. Like, his teammates are nowhere beside him. If you look at all the red jerseys, like, they're all playing around each other here, right? And we can just resume it from here, and then we'll see, like, still nobody from Space Station anywhere near until finally, pause here, where Cyno blinks and engages, and yet again, he is the only member alongside JeffHindla. He has no real control coming through anywhere kind of deal. Like, where are his teammates? Whereas everyone coming through from Dignitas is present. If we resume it from here, Dignitas still managed to get the Gold Fury from a very close steal out of Space Station. It just wasn't enough. Dignitas continued to go through this fight, getting 4 kills and dominating the rest of this game.
Here's the thing. Look at the gold differential between these two teams as well, right? Team Dignitas are up 5,000 post Gold Fury. They were only up 3,000 gold. And so when I look at this play, Anatoly, and you show me how isolated Jeff is for Cyno, if they're down 7 or 10,000, this play makes sense because JeffHindla goes in, gets the ire of the enemy team, Cyno goes in for the steal, and if somebody dies, you're throwing away a support for a Gold Fury steal, at which point would literally tie the game.
Yeah.
So if that's the play that you're, if that's the play that you're looking at when you can't take the team fight, I applaud it. But down 3,000 gold, you absolutely can take the team fight. So there was two things that, one of two things went wrong here in my opinion. Either the team said, we can't take this fight, which is the wrong decision-making, or they just got there late, which is the wrong decision-making.
Because at the very end, you saw how BaRRaCCuDDa was flanking on the top side of the Gold Fury. They were just all had different timings where Jeff goes in first, then Cyno blinks in, and then Bear on the backside. If all three of those things happen at the same time, then maybe they find a kill, maybe Space Station actually steal the objective and keep themselves in the game and keep themselves in this set.
So I'm going to ask you to put the old Fnatic jersey on, Coach Tolley, one more time.
Sure.
What is, when you take this VOD and you take this back to Space Station, right? Is it lack of communication? Is it lack of map awareness, just not paying attention to when that Gold Fury is going?
I just think there's so much pressure on these players from what they were accomplished in their yesteryears to what they're doing now. The way I saw Andinster play in the Anhur jumping in at 12.5 minutes didn't make much logical sense to me, trying to get the kill onto Hurriwind on the Hell. He was just overzealous, over-aggressive, trying to force a play that just wasn't there naturally. They just need to figure out something that works for them, and thus far, between Phase 1 and what I've seen from them in the first set of Phase 2, it's not happening.
Space Station might still be looking for it, but Dignitas have certainly found it. This team knows what their identity is, and they just showed it off in 3 fantastic games. Standing by, we've got some of the members of the Victory team to talk about what just happened.
Well, I'm here with Ataraxia and Trixtank. I guess formerly the dual lane, but you don't see each other that much as more now. So I'll ask you about that then, Ataraxia. It feels like you can play just about whatever you want over there in the long lane now. I mean, how is it for you having kind of free range over there, and how do you like the current meta?
It's a brave new world. It's a whole new frontier. No one knows what anyone's playing. Like, we have a few like secret picks we didn't get to show off. But I don't, like, honestly, I just want to play Hunters. They just introduced Felnut, and it's so awesome and so really good, and I just can't use it, and it just feels terrible. But it's fun, it's exciting, and it's tough, you know, because like every day we turn up to scrim, someone's got something new, and then it's just, you know, you got to adjust and then learn again.
Coming from the team perspective as a whole, by the way, riding off the back of MSI, now entering Phase 2 here, were you guys expecting this type of results after everything that went down from the last LAN?
I think we had a little bit of a downfall in the end of the season for sure, and we had a rough time coming back and figuring out like what we do after the Fire Giant nerf, I guess. But we're slowly getting there, and I feel like we're just getting our footing again. And MSI was kind of like a test of how decent we were, but I just think Renegades was just a powerhouse at that event. So we've taken notes from that and what they did, and hopefully we can figure out our path again.
Well, it really felt like you all improved each game of this set. Like you could even see the game time slowly going down with each game. Is that how it felt for you all as well when you were in the game? Like you all were like kind of clicking more as it went on?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think as a team, like psychology-wise, we tend to ease up more on game day. I think when it comes to scrims, we can actually be a pretty toxic scrim team, and we definitely have our issues there. But when it comes to game day, all that stuff washes away, and the longer into the set we go, the more natural everything feels, and everything feels right as it should be. And I think that's really important for us. So generally, the longer the set goes, the better we are.
All right, well, congratulations to you all on this first win, starting phase 2 on a good note. Looking forward to seeing you all again, so we'll get it back to the desk, let them wrap it up.
Ataraxia, elegant as always, and Trix, what are you doing? I don't really know what he's doing at the end of that there, but having a good time, and that's the most important thing. 3 games, and those guys certainly enjoyed it.
That's right. And then just looking back at the record between Cyno as well versus QvoFred, that 6-3 favoring Cyno now becomes 6-6.
That, of course, is the individual, but on the team level, 8-2 is Team Dignitas now as they lift another one up above. 2-8 though for SSG. Some things to work on. Tully and I discussed it, some of the communication issues that might come up, but they've got a chance tomorrow to bring one home. Spacestation will be going head-to-head against Splice, the defending world champions, who obviously have gone through a number of roster changes, and they'll be having an exciting moment here, I think, because what's happened earlier in phase number 1 with the departure of Divios, we saw Baskin, but everybody knew it wasn't long-term, and I find it hard to really kind of internalize when you know you're kind of working on a deadly. Solo or Troll makes his debut tomorrow. Real quick, Tully, what are you expecting on that one?
I'm expecting domination. I think that Space Station Gaming should take a lot from this set because there was a lot of respect given to them through Dignitas in that first game, but then once that respect started in game number 2, it was just removed right away. It went to 30 minutes and 20 minutes. I think Space Station needs to prepare for Splice because it did not look good for them in this first game.
We'll certainly watch it out. Tomorrow's going to be another fantastic day of SPL action. 1 p.m. Atlanta time. I always forget if it's EST or EDT, so I say Atlanta time. That's where we broadcast from every single day, and we're very happy to do it. Myself, Anatoly, the 4 of the fantastic broadcasters here, the team of fantastic production players as well. We wish you luck, and we hope to see you tomorrow. Peace, and much love to you.